intersectionality.
What it is, what it do, shoulin for every back for you. Once again, one more again. Professor Black Truth in the house, about to break down the professional black talkers of the Black Caucus that supposedly work for black people, foundational blacks, ADOS or DOS. They all derive from descendants of slaves. Black folks in America. Now, what we gonna do is we're gonna break it down, fuck the bullshit, and start playing around. All black people, as well as the diaspora, need to get on code and understand what the fuck is really going down. Control your own country. If y'all want to come over here acting all like motherfucking Sambos and Coonish, nigga, y'all can get moved. Y'all can just step to the side and get stepped on. As we were, Professor Black Truth breaking down and exposing the Congressional Black Caucus. Why they never do anything for black folk. Just some bullshit. Brought to you by Bash Reeves and his notorious ass-kicking spree, the real Lone Ranger. And here we go again, once again, one more again. About to do it again. My friend.
Let me go ahead and say from the outset that this is going to be a rather lengthy introduction to the subject of why it is that we have been deceived by the Congressional Black Caucus and the danger that it serves to have others speaking for you. If the immigrant blacks wish to speak for themselves, that's fine. But they cannot speak for us because we do not come from a common cultural or historical experience. We do not have a common bond, and that's what we're going to be discussing here. Now, this is going to be a lengthy introduction because I'm going to be reading from a book called The Tigers of Tammany. I've told you about it before. And it's important that we discuss this in particular because you need to understand how white supremacy works when it's trying to erase a group of people, especially over a course of time, to carry out a guilt-free genocide. You devour them physically by killing them off or strangling them for resources so as to dwindle their numbers. And then along the way, what you're doing is you're devouring them culturally and socially too. Whatever they contributed, whatever their culture is, you're eating that too. You're eating up whatever it is that these people are. You're taking on their practices and you're taking on certain aspects of their behavior. Not because you like them, not because you're trying to continue their cultural legacy, but precisely because this is part of the devouring process. You're absorbing them in everything except physically because you're trying to eliminate them physically. And you'll just have a few pieces of whatever their culture was because it's vibrant to try to inject some life into your own dying, desiccated culture. You see this all over the place, especially with those of us who survived slavery here in America. Foundational black culture has been just completely ripped off and appropriated, had its blood drained, and a million other violations. Happens. You also find that there are white Australians and New Zealanders who will take on the Maori people while they're wiping them out and still strangling them for resources. But if they're football games, their little soccer games, they'll start off their games with doing one of those tribal games. You'll have a bunch of white guys out there with a few of the black fellas, quote unquote. Traditional Maori war dance. This for people who they're trying to wipe out. So just understand, that's how this works. Now, why is this the case? Now, every thief steals, but the really clever thieves, the really slick ones, the really sophisticated thieves, like white supremacists and their operatives try to do, is to legitimize their theft. Notice the wording that I used. Legitimize. I didn't say justify. A man who has not eaten in a couple of days and who steals some food from a market that man would justify it by saying I was hungry. He's justifying the threat, but he's not legitimizing it. On the other hand, when you have somebody who claims, yeah, I know I didn't have anything to do with the 15th Amendment or the Voting Rights Act or Brown v. Board, but you know what? I went to school because of those laws, and because of that, I think that I'm the best person to speak for all of you people who did fight for all of these changes, and, well, you know, I like Dr. King as much as you do. And hey, what about Malcolm X's mother? And what about Shirley Chisholm? And hey, Marcus Garvey didn't come out of American slavery. So if you had no problem with them, you can't have a problem with me. You got all these clowns trying to grandfather clause themselves into our history and looking for any flimsy, feeble tactic they can use to legitimize their own duplicity and treachery against us, because that's what's going on. You got people trying to lay claim to our history, trying to steal our place in the world, and they're trying to legitimize it, meaning to make it right. This is the right thing to do. This is supposed to happen. This is right. That's what legitimize means. Now, if you want an example of that, keep in mind, they're taking the playbook right out of white supremacy, literally. There's a book that I told you about, which you can still get online, called Tigers and Tammany. I've mentioned it in the past, and the main reason that I want to bring it up for this evening's video essay is because of the fact that this book was written in 1967. I got a lot of books that basically, a lot of them start in the 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, and some before that. And it's a matter of why does Professor Black Truth collect all these old books? And that's the reason for that happens to be it's way before the internet, way before what we would, even those of us who were Generation X who grew up with
broadband and fucking dial-up.
Before all that, you had to, when you want to do a history,
you had to fucking read books. You had to go to the library.
It's part of the reason why so many academics or people who had worked in government, like at the Smithsonian and such, why these were largely people who were involved in the writing of these books and not the collation of the information. Because you had to go to actual source documents, stuff that was kept in archives, stuff that you couldn't go to the library to get because it wasn't in books that had already been published. The book itself starts off with a white man being inducted into the Society of St. Tammany. Now, I'm not entirely sure when this takes place. It probably most likely took place in the early 19th century. But the point that I'm trying to make is Tammany is a Native American name. That's the name of a Native American chieftain. His name was actually Tamarand, but by the time they were done bastardizing it, it was Tammany, and that's where Tammany Hall comes from. You got a bunch of white guys here running around with an organization named after a Native American chieftain. This is typical of white supremacy. Part of how they legitimize their theft is by actually devouring the people through warfare. You're chewing them up to nothing. And then afterwards, you're also devouring their culture. This is the reason why cultural appropriation is so damnable. This is genocide taking place. This is what the world they're doing, because they're not doing it because they like you. They're doing it because they're attempting to absorb you and erase you. And the only thing that will be left will be just a couple old wives' tales and whatever few fragments of what you did. They'll take away whatever they feel is dynamic and vibrant about your culture so they can prop up their own empty, desiccated, and dying culture of their own. But the truth is, it's vampirism. Now, the Tigers of Tammany starts off with the induction ceremony, and I know this is going to take a while. That's part of the reason why I'm posting this separately. This is admittedly a prelude to the entire video essay regarding the immigrant black caucus in general, but I think that it's important that we go over this step by step because I want you to see how long this has been going on, because these are rituals and such that go all the way back to the 18th century. In fact, the idea of the Europeans attempting to try to appropriate back way before $5 Indians. Now here's the beginning of the book. In the great wigwam of the island of Manhattan's, 2 columns of fiercely painted braves stood silently, their eyes fixed on the closed curtain. Behind the curtain, the sagamore of the tribe, tomahawk in hand, the badge of a soaring eagle over his heart, interrogated a trembling paleface. "Are you a citizen of the United States?" the sagamore asked in perfect English. "Etho," the captive replied, hoping to curry favor through his knowledge of the Indian tongue. "Are your intentions friendly and honorable?" the sagamore persisted. "Etho." "And are you a lover of freedom?" "Etho." The tribe's Wiskinki, a surly-looking brave with 2 large keys hooked to his belt, walked behind the curtain. He too wore a badge, this one depicting a great eye over a door with the words inscribed, "No slave nor tyrant enters." After a moment, the Wiskinki reappeared from behind the curtain and moved quickly to a door at the opposite end of the wigwam. "John Morton," the Wiskinki shouted to the door. From behind the door, a deep voice acknowledged the name of the white stranger. The Wiskinki returned to the curtain and whispered to the Sagamore.
Blow that shit up,
The
goddamn
Sagamore
it.
emerged and walked between the 2 columns of braves to
Boom,
the door.
bitch.
He knocked 3 times. 2 times sounded in reply.
Die, bitch.
Turned to his prisoner behind the
Get off my motherfucking homeboy, goddamn it.
wigwam resounded with voices raised in song.
Get off my motherfucking homeboy, goddamn
Sacred
it.
the ground where freedom is found, and virtue stamps its name. Our hearts entwine at friendship's shrine, and union fans the flame. Our hearts
I couldn't see it last
sincere,
night.
here with joyful voice confirm your choice, Etho. The curtain was rapidly drawn aside. The man named John Morton was pushed forward. His path between the 2 lines of braves was lighted by 2 men carrying torches. Behind them came the Sagamore bearing a cap of liberty perched on a tall staff. As John Morton walked the gauntlet forward to block his way. The man in the middle, the father of the council, raised his tomahawk above the prisoner's head. The tomahawk came crashing down. In the nick of time, the Sagamore deflected the blow of the tomahawk with his liberty staff. "Sago, Sagamore," asked the father of the council, raising the tomahawk to strike again. "Sago, Oli," the Sagamore replied. "Is this stranger worthy of a seat among us?" the father of the council asked in English, still brandishing his tomahawk. "Etho," said the Sagamore. "Does he love freedom? Etho. Will he unbury the tomahawk from beneath the great wigwam before his country's good requirement? Will he bear adversity, torture, and death in defense of liberty, like a true son of Tammany? Etho." The father of the council dropped his tomahawk to his side. "Conduct him, Sagamore, to our great Sakem." The small procession of torchbearers, Sagamore, and frightened stranger continued along its way between the 2 columns of braves to the door. "Grand Sakem," the Sagamore addressed the door, "this stranger has given the fullest assurance of his sincere intentions to support the harmony, reputation, constitution, and laws of this society, and it is therefore recommended that he be adopted as a brother." The door opened, the great Sakem, mightiest of the tribe, stepped out. A hush fell over the wigwam. The great Sakem glared at the paleface, then he spoke softly. "Friend, the favorable reports given of your character and intentions have recommended you to the acceptance of this society."
Watch out.
The Sagamore handed the staff with the cap of liberty to the Grand Sakem, who held it over the head of John Morton. "John Morton," intoned the Grand Sakem, "you do freely declare that you will support the harmony, reputation, constitution, and laws of this society, and preserve inviolably all its secrets from the knowledge of others." John Morton raised his left hand. "Etho," he replied. The Grand Sakem returned to the assembled braves. "Brothers, are you satisfied with the declaration and obligation of the candidate?" The braves stamped their feet in unison. "Etho," they cried. Now the Wiskinki walked over to John Morton and bent toward him expectantly. Morton whispered in his ear, "Liberty is our life." The Wiskinki whispered back, "May you ever enjoy it." John Morton placed his left hand over his heart, and the Wiskinki repeated the gesture. Then Morton extended his left hand and interlocked forefingers with the Wiskinki in the Tamanial grip of brotherhood. The Grand Sakem spoke. "I now confirm you as a son of Tammany and member of the Columbian Order." The new brave was led to a leather-bound volume where he signed John Morton to the Constitution of the Society of St. Tammany. It was now 2 hours past the setting of the sun on the 3rd day of the 2nd moon, season of snows, the year of discovery 347, of independence 63, and of the institution 50. The Grand Sakem turned once more to his tribe. "Would you now be willing to lose this brother?" The braves stamped their feet. "Yata," they cried. Now, if you're wondering where all that strangeness was from, it happened to be part of the details, it happened to be part of the rituals that were kept by Tammany's membership. And it was donated to Columbia University in 1965. They kept records of these little rituals. Who was there, what was said. They kept rituals of this stuff going back to the late 18th century. So if you want to know what the world was going on, why the Freemasons, white guys, have no problem running around in black Egyptian attire, naming themselves after Egyptian organizations, now you know why. Here these guys are, freely interchanging the names of Native American authority figures and an organization named after a Native American chieftain, but calling itself the Columbian Order. Columbia, that's freaking Christopher Columbus. So you see what the hell it is they're doing there. You see what's going on. This is important because I want you to understand this is what they've been doing for hundreds of years now. They've been doing this for hundreds of years. Devouring the cultures of the people who they come across and appropriating it as their own and trying to add legitimacy to their theft by saying, oh, we call our place we don't call it a hall, we don't call it a temple, we call it a wigwam. And we don't call this guy here the president or the organization, we call him the Grand Sachem. That's what we call him. Oh, why, this organization was named after a Native American chieftain, so you can't say that we just hated the Native Americans and slaughtered these Indians. Why, it's more complex than that. Did you know that my great-grandfather was part Native American? I mean, you see the game going on here. Ain't got a damn thing to do with respecting those who they wiped out. It's all about legitimizing what they've done. And I recognize that was kind of a long way around to approach that. But the thing is, that's important to me because that sticks out to me, and I want it to stick out to you so you can understand how long they've been doing this. Now, on to the Black Immigrant Caucus. Pew Research performed a study last year listing the members of Congress who were either immigrants or second generation. But as I've always taught you, when it comes to us as foundational blacks, we have to do our own research. You can't just be sitting here thinking that the people who enslaved us and that the propaganda arm of white supremacy, which Pew Research is part of, that they're going to be actually trying to do us any favors. White media, and this includes white think tanks like Pew Research, they're only going to scrape the surface, and mostly for the sake of legitimizing their program, not for the sake of exposing what they're really doing. Besides, their job is to protect tools of white supremacy, and few tools are as valuable as the black misleadership class. They are crucial to confusing and undermining our internal politics. Now, you see some of the usual suspects among the list, like Kamala Harris and Ilhan Omar, but you see a few others like Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, who was born in Brooklyn, but her parents are from Jamaica, just like Kamala Harris. Yvette Clarke has said practically nothing about black people and absolutely nothing about a black agenda. Sheila Jackson Lee has been exposed as a white power tool she's always been. Something about Jamaica seems to make them especially attractive to white power to be their puppets. Congressman Anthony Brown, he was born in New York, but his mother is a white woman from Switzerland and his father an Afro-Cuban. Congressman Joe Negussie, his parents are both from Eritrea. Congressman Stephen Horsford, born in Las Vegas, but his parents are immigrants from Trinidad. The problem with Pew Research, of course, is that as part of the white media, they don't go in depth. They just do a quick blink and you'll miss it mention and then run along. But this is the black media. We dig way beyond the surface. Now I'm going to do a quick listing of them off top, and then we're going to go in depth with each of them. Congressman Delgado of New York. His father is Puerto Rican. Congressman Anthony Brown of Maryland, who used to be that state's former lieutenant governor. His mother is a white woman from Switzerland, and his father is an Afro-Cuban. So how the hell did he wind up with an Anglo name then? Because Anthony Brown is neither Swiss nor Cuban. Well, they didn't do it so that he could seem American, because American means white. The reason they did it was to help him pass as one of us, because they understood exactly what advantages America was going to give him by virtue of his bloodline, which didn't go back to the plantations. Congressman Joe Neguse of Colorado. His parents are from Eritrea, and his wife is Hispanic. This man has done nothing, absolutely nothing for black people. He talks the same colorblind nonsense that he knows casual racist, we white moderates want to hear. They want an immigrant who doesn't mention America's sins and crimes against black people. You can rail on about anything you want, except for foundational black folks and what we're owed. This menagerie of clowns, as I started going through their bios, it was like watching a non-stop monster movie, just villain after villain. Though it became particularly interesting when I got to Stephen Horsford, and yes, he immediately made me think of Stephen from Django. He co-sponsored House Resolution 15, a bill that would be giving blanket amnesty to all illegal aliens in the U.S. So he showed that his top priority was and is not black Americans, not foundational blacks, but immigrants. His record is the kind of anti-foundational black nonsense you would expect from a white power puppet. But it was when I looked into his spouse that things really got interesting. Congressman Horsford is married to Sonia Horsford, a so-called academic who has a degree in educational leadership, whatever that means. She also majored in speech communication. Not sure what exactly that qualifies her to do, but white power doesn't pick its operatives based on credentials. She's currently a professor at Columbia University. See how Columbia's name keeps coming up over and over again? When it comes to how white power is steeped, it's no accident that Columbia's name comes up so much. Because you want to know who else was a professor at Columbia? Barack Obama. He taught constitutional law there. Yep. These white institutions of lower learning have a fetish for biracials who they indoctrinate with all kinds of anti-black nonsense and then push into our community claiming that they're one of us. As you can see, this Sonia Horsford doesn't have much color to her skin at all. I immediately wanted to know where she's from. Yeah, I can't find it. I wanted to know about her parents. Not much info on them either, except for a Twitter post that she made, which linked to an Instagram picture, a black man and an Asian woman. You know, for someone who's so proud of her parents, she's gone out of her way not to say one piddling word about them. Now, you can love whomever you want, but there's a reality here. We don't live in a contextless vacuum. What defines the context of the world we live in are group power dynamics. And right now, all of those dynamics are controlled or overwhelmingly influenced by white supremacy. And black people as a group have no power. So when some type of conflict arises, it's a hell of a lot more likely that you'll go in the direction of your non-black significant other than that they'll go in the direction of black society. That's the reality. Are the interests of this non-black wife the same as the black community? Because we do have interests. The Asian community certainly has their interests, and allying themselves with us isn't one of them. Taking Sonia Horsford's parents as a case study, even if this Asian woman is the purest of the pure and the nicest of the nice, so what? She isn't in a position to lead Asian people. She is only representative of herself. This is why I don't waste time with black people who like to bring up their non-black friend who they're cool with, or some non-black boyfriend or girlfriend or acquaintance who they claim to be cool with. Your exceptional pal is exactly that, an exception. Your one non-black friend is one person, and you can't have an alliance with one person. As foundational blacks, we are a group. And groups don't have alliances with one person, unless that person is someone of the caliber of Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. We live under a system of white supremacy, and that supremacy is not defined by anti-Asian racism. It is defined exclusively by anti-black racism. And if you want to be more specific than that, exclusively anti-foundational black racism. And while you're busy looking for true love, white supremacy is plotting how to wipe you and all the other black folks out. Not how to wipe the Asians out. They're trying to figure out how to wipe black people out. Also, when you look at Sonia Horsford's Twitter timeline, you see her pushing that fraud about a black-brown alliance. Gee, have you ever noticed how the only time that we see Hispanics talking about police violence against black people is when they're trying to finesse us into supporting more of them being brought into the country? when they're trying to finesse us into supporting what is nothing less than amnesty, then all of a sudden they give a blink and you'll miss it mention to police violence against black people. Of course, what they never mention is either George Zimmerman or Officer Yanez in Minnesota who murdered Philando Castile, or any of the other Hispanic police officers who decide to enact violence against black people. Their names never come up. The same way that you can be married to an Asian person, but you notice when it came time for the Asian community to step up for Peter Liang, they did it across the board. Nobody in the Asian community was sticking up for Akai Gurley, who, by the way, was descended from immigrants, just for the record. You take a look at how these Hispanic communities have treated black people either in their home countries or elsewhere. Just take a look at how they treat black people here in the U.S. And then they turn around and say, you should support more Hispanics being brought into the country so black folks can get more such treatment. No, when it comes to the mythical Black-Brown alliance, the Latinos clearly get the better end of that deal, and yet it's a deal that Sonia Hornsford is advocating for. So Sonia Hornsford is only interested in what would benefit immigrants, legal or not. And look at this asinine little saying here. Tu Luca is my Luca. Actually, it's not. My fight is against immigrants who come to the U.S. to carry out anti-black racism and anti-black violence. Is that the fight of these Hispanic communities? I don't think so. And this is what a congressman's wife posts. None of this reflects what black people think. None of this reflects what black people have demanded. And people like Sonia Hornsford and her husband know that. So even if you want to try to say that Stephen Hornsford's not as bad as all that, you see what the world his wife does. While he's busy giving you some of Dr. King's greatest hits, he's giving you the quotable Dr. King, and he's sitting you to the scam. You see what his wife is out there doing. Understand that the black misleadership class was an invention of white supremacy. They're not there to reflect our interests. They are there to get us to work against our interests or to sit on our hands while white supremacy continues apace. They are there to be the black face, to sell us white lies. They are there to always try to talk us into inaction when bold action is what's called for. So for those of you out there who think to yourselves that it doesn't matter who it is that you happen to be in love with, it does matter under white supremacy because nothing happens in a vacuum under white supremacy. And being a black person, you can't afford to go through life being casual. Your color matters, as does your bloodline. So the further your bloodline moves away from a foundational black, a survivor of slavery in the U.S., the further that you're moving away from our history, our struggle, and the common bond that came out of coming from a common experience. Your experience did not come from Asians who came over after Vietnam. It didn't happen. Your bloodline and your common experience is not with Koreans or with Japanese immigrants or Chinese immigrants or Hispanics coming in across the Rio Grande. Your experience with people who came out of slavery. That's important because those Hispanic communities are not pretending as if they've got something in common with you. Those Asians are not pretending like they got something in common with you. So why are you trying to pretend as if you don't have something in common with yourself? So no, I'm afraid that the Asian wife most likely cannot understand where we're coming from. And I say that based on the behavior of the group that she comes from. I look at the group's behavior, that group's attitude toward us. And then you look at Sonia Hornsford. She's half black, but you look at what she writes, what she proclaims, and she talks like any other white liberal that you ever heard. Hell, her books are co-authored by white people, so there you go. Congressman Hornsford's wife has written all kinds of tripe, such as intersectional identities and educational leadership of black women in the USA. Did you catch that title? Intersectional identities. Now, haven't I always warned you about words like intersectional? These were terms created by white power and put into the mouths of black so-called academics. And you notice that those black academics usually come from a culture outside of foundational black culture. You got a bunch of people who consider themselves to be primarily LGBT or immigrants or biracials. Intersectional is a political term meant to attack us. Congressman Hornsford's wife is the typical white power shill trying to drive wedges between black people on the basis of gender, because that's why the European enslaved us, wasn't it? Because our ancestors were all women, right? You see the game that she's playing here? She's showing up and trying to push all sorts of dogma and ideology that serves to fracture the black community. You want to know why it is that we happen to have tangibles on the record now as part of American politics? It's because black men and black women have worked together. They put aside all the lies that the Europeans were trying to use and decide we're getting behind this message. This is the same thing that happened in the 1860s and was successful to bring down chattel slavery, but it also happened
from beyond the grave, bitch.
and failed because a lot of black women decided that they were going to fragment themselves and try to jump on the feminist bandwagon. And you see that people like Congressman Horsford's wife are trying to figure out if the feminism tactic still has some miles left in it. She praises black feminism in her books and she rails against the patriarchy and all the rest of it. I'm sure there's plenty more stupidity from this woman, but I've seen enough. I didn't even bother to go through Stephen Horsford's Twitter timeline, believe it or not, because seeing his wife's Twitter feed was more than enough.
Right after this
and
Mexican?
You thought the insanity of Stephen Horsford's wife was outrageous? You ain't seen nothing yet. Next, we're going to take a closer look at Congressman Antonio Delgado of New York. As I told you, he's half black, half Puerto Rican. Now, here's a picture of him with his wife.
Wow, that cool.
Not sure what ethnicity she is. That's understandable because she doesn't know either. And I'm not making that up.
No.
4 years ago, Lacey Schwartz, as she was known then, had a story run about her in the Telegraph. She was born in New York City and raised to think that she was a white Jew. As she states in the article, quote, I went to the synagogue, bar mitzvahs, Hebrew school. Yeah, but her Jewish relatives and the rest of the Jewish community, they didn't feel the need to play along with what was an obvious lie. They knew she wasn't white, and they occasionally made little digs at her, calling her an Ethiopian Jew and the like. Lacey's mother would go on later to admit that she had indeed had an adulterous affair with a black man, which of course led to the destruction of her marriage. Well, it does make perfect sense when you think about it. After all, the word Schwartz, it does mean black in German. Hey, you know I had to mention that little fact. And Lacey gives an interesting window into the utter chaos of being biracial and how confused they often are. Hearing her talk about race is like listening to two schizophrenics having an argument. She claims that racial identity is fluid and contextual. There goes that intersectional crap. That train is never late. She then goes on to say racial identity can change depending on where you are and who you're around.
What?
Now, in what world does that make any sense? Tell me, at what point can Denzel Washington claim
he's a white man?
After all, racial identity is fluid and contextual, and it changes depending on where you are and who you're around. So Denzel Washington works around mostly white folks, so he can go ahead and claim that he's white, right? See, the one-drop rule simply means that your status as white, i.e. white privileges, can be revoked arbitrarily. Doesn't matter if you're blonde-haired and blue-eyed and your parents came from Sweden going back 100 generations. If you have one black person, or if in your bloodline, or if you're deemed to have had a black person in your bloodline, then your white card is revoked. Racial identity is not fluid because the flow only goes one way. People who wanted to be white but were cast off and thrown in the same category as black people. And even Lacey Schwartz knows that too. If you want to see how this woman contradicts herself from sentence to sentence because her head is so screwed up. Next in the article, she says two diametrically opposed things. That being biracial is in fact a category of being black, but then she says that it's an inclusive thing. Now notice that. You want to see how it is that white supremacy weaponizes ethnicity. They take people who they have basically taken their minds and just confused them and spun them into jelly. And then they take these people and say they're part of the black community. These people who are so confused and in many cases full of self-hate. And then you put them into the black community so that they can just cause all sorts of confusion and all sorts of disorder because that's what happens. This woman contradicts herself from one sentence to the next. She doesn't know whether she's coming or going. She just got through describing being biracial as a one-way street, one that precludes you being white, but then she claims that it's inclusive. Now I want you to ask yourselves this question. What attracted Antonio Delgado to this woman?
Man.
A woman who thinks race is fluid. Acknowledges, however, that this fluidity only goes one way, but still insists that it's inclusive somehow. Inclusive of what and of whom?
Ooh.
How do you push a black agenda with a man who is clearly running from blackness and a woman who thinks black is whatever you want it to be? This is who and what white power installed as the black misleadership class. This is what's wrong with the Congressional Black Caucus. This is who claims to speak for you and me. What do we have in common with this menagerie of self-hating anti-black lunatics? Even the members of the CBC who are not necessarily immigrants or descended from immigrants, at least not that we found yet, they cape all the damn time for immigrants. Cedric Richmond of Louisiana went on Twitter, and he was demanding that illegal aliens from Vietnam be protected from deportation because they played a major role in my district and in cities all across America. Well, you can tell that there happens to be a couple of campaign contributions, but the thing is, this is about more than money. The reason this Richmond clown is talking like this is because of ideology. This guy is trying to basically bury the black community. He's trying to ignore the black community. This guy wants to make it clear to his white paymasters, I know what my job is. I'm going to carry water for white supremacy. I'm not here to represent black folks. I want them to just be completely and thoroughly ignored. And this stance is doubly stupid because there is no Vietnamese voting bloc in Louisiana. It's literally almost entirely black and white. Sure, there's a few enclaves, especially in South Louisiana, but not enough to matter electorally. But this guy doesn't give a damn about the black part of his constituency. How about Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of the Congressional Black Talkers? His uncle is the esteemed Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Yes, that Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Well, the apple fell far from the tree on this one. Then you got Congresswoman Johanna Haynes. The white media was so eager to praise her as being a teacher, but that's not true. She's actually an administrator now. She hasn't been a teacher in forever. But the white media calls her a teacher anyway. This reminds me of the whole Joe the Plumber con that the Republicans tried back in 2008. However, the white media is not so eager to mention that Johanna Haynes' husband is a cop. Kind of reminds you of how frequent MSNBC mouthpiece Jason Johnson's mother is in law enforcement, but that doesn't get mentioned much. And of course, we must deal with the stupidity of Ayanna Pressley. Remember how she made a proper fool of herself, calling that group of absolute irrelevant females her squad, clearly the losing team. She's trying to raise her own pathetic profile. She was out there with Ilhan Omar and that Tlaib woman and Alexandria Cortez. Ayanna Pressley's not an immigrant. She's not even the children of immigrants, nor the grandchild of immigrants. So far, she seems to basically be descended from foundational blacks, though you damn sure couldn't tell by how she was out there caping for immigrants the other day. This is a disgrace for her to do that, because you damn sure don't see that Tlaib woman holding press conferences about the treatment of black people, held without trial and often dying behind bars. You take a look at the infamous Rikers Island. How many of those prisoners there kept in solitary confinement, sometimes often for years? How many of them are black? How many of them did that Tlaib woman say one piddling word for? And yet you got Ayanna Pressley putting on the cape for people who aren't even American citizens. Where was Ilhan Omar at to demand prosecution for police or self-appointed killers of black people? Where was she at? Hell, this woman couldn't even be bothered to stick up for a fellow Somali in Mohammed Noor. Not even a police do a dangerous job and Blue Lives Matters from her. You've got to balance the taken with the given, family, and I only do business with others to the extent that they do business with me. If you stick up for me a lot, then I'll stick up for you a lot. You only stick up for me a little, or only when you want something from me, then I'm only going to stick up for you a few times, or only when I'm trying to get something. And if you don't stick up for me at all, then you can guess how often you're going to see me, especially when Donald Trump comes for you. But from these immigrant communities, their behavior towards foundational blacks goes far beyond merely not sticking up for us. From Koreans who murder black children allegedly over shoplifting, to Latinos who murder black teenagers over a can of iced tea, at what point do they acknowledge our humanity and stick up for us? When are we going to see these immigrant communities out there campaigning for us? We've already seen the answer, and it is never. Because those immigrant Asians did not have one word of sympathy or support for Akai Gurley. Why? Because as far as they were concerned, he was killed by an Asian, so right or wrong, they're sticking with Peter Liang. And for Ayanna Pressley to do this is a damnable thing, one that she should be forgiven for. The white media will use this unthinking twit and present her as speaking for all of us. This is why you need the black media. I told you white power invested its enormous resources into creating entire constellations of black tools. The black bootlicks in the media are just one of them, and Ayanna Pressley is another. This black bootlicking government is going to be reported on by a black bootlick on CNN like Don Lemonade or MSNBC like Joy Reid, and then they'll be cheered on by some black bootlick like DeRay McKeeson or She the People. This is supposed to be what passes for black grassroots, at least as the white media tries to present it. Well, we've got to overturn this con. We have to dedicate ourselves to cleaning house. You cannot repair the black misleadership class any more than you can repair white supremacy. The festering black cabal of politicians who we are cursed with today are in fact inventions of white supremacy. White supremacy created the Congressional Black Caucus. And with this deep dive I've done to their membership, I hope it's a little more clear why that is. When I say white power has used its vast resources to create and set up entire constellations of black bootlicks to do their bidding, the Congressional Black Talkers are just a prime example. Now, you probably thought that the problem was just limited to a few bad actors, or perhaps it was just some people who didn't understand what policies we need because they've been inside the Beltway too long. Or maybe it's just a few old men with a few old ideas that's the problem. Just old men with old ideas. The problem is the entire Congressional Black Caucus itself, because they were created by white supremacy and not created by black empowerment. They are populated, staffed, and overrun with a whole bunch of people whose interests happen to be immigrants, LGBT, trying to make themselves acceptable to white power, anything except for black empowerment. That's the problem. We have no common bond with somebody like a Joe Neguse. We have no common bond with an Anthony Brown. We don't share any common ground with people like Stephen Horsford. We have no common ground with them. We have no common history. We have no common achievements. We have no common ideology, and we have no common goals. We are completely alien and separate to one another. We have to be honest about that reality. So why the world is it then that we allow these individuals to try to palm themselves off as one of us? It's because power to basically say that anybody who's black basically is beneath us, and because of that, throwing them in with us, that somehow white power had no concern or no use for these immigrants or biracials, when that wasn't true at all. White power didn't want them among them, but it's not that white power had no plans for them and had no use for them. White power was looking at these individuals who they threw among us as being tools to help disrupt our internal politics and throw us into disarray and keep us completely and thoroughly politically confused, and that's exactly what they've done. So these guys, they have served a very important purpose for white supremacy. Well, it's time for us to bring that purpose to an end. This is the reason why disengaging from the electoral fraud of American politics is so important. We have to have foundational blacks who have bent the knee and taken the pledge to black empowerment, supporting and representing us. You shouldn't be voting for anyone unless that person came to you, bent the knee, and has taken the pledge. And he has to be a foundational black. That's just the reality. Because when you have a Stephen Horsford who shows up and his wife is sitting here talking that intersectionality crap, she shares no common ground with us. She's working against our interests. Stephen Horsford, if he wants to represent Trinidadians, let him go do that. And we'll see how many congressional seats he gets. And if Anthony Brown wants to represent the Swiss contingent of Americans or the Afro-Cubans, let him go down to Florida. He'll have to leave Maryland, that's for sure. He won't be able to find much voter support in Maryland. Let him go down to Florida. We'll see if he finds a big number of Afro-Cubans there, and then see if they can get him into any offices. No, let them represent the people who they share common ground with. And we will be represented by the ones who we share common ground with, because the black community is no longer going to be a stepping stone to a life of comfort and wealth and privilege for some hand-picked con men and con women. That day is done. We are no longer going to be subsidizing our oppression by empowering those who white power sent among us for the sake of holding us down. The Congressional Black Talker's job is to present the black community to the world as being one giant black mammy. On the plantation, the black mammy cared for everyone except for her own children. She took care of Massa's children, and if Massa had some next-door neighbors, she would go ahead and make sure that their kids were nursed as well. She took care of everybody's babies except for her own. This is the job of the Congressional Black Caucus, to present black people as caring about everyone else's interests except our own, being concerned for everyone else's welfare except our own. Because when the white media presents somebody like a Cedric Richmond to the world saying, we gotta care about the Vietnamese community, well, when black folks are left with empty pockets, destitute in the streets, well, they can't be too concerned about that. Why? Their own representatives don't care. And when Maxine Waters and Kamala Harris are not out there on the warpath for black people's tangibles, well, when you look at Skid Row in Los Angeles, which is overwhelmingly black, that's where the black folks went to. You want to know what happened to the black community in LA? Check out Skid Row. That's where they all went. That's where they got sent to. But how are you going to be framing that in terms of racial injustice when your own black representatives don't say boo about it? And that's the point. Black people chose these leaders and they don't say anything, except the thing is we didn't actually choose them. What happened was we took the path of least resistance. We didn't actually want these clowns, but the problem is we've been indoctrinated with the idea of you've got to vote, too many people have died, etc., etc. And then what happens is, instead of us fielding our own candidates, what happens is white power comes along and says, you don't have to. Why? You got this Joe Neguse over here, and he's going to talk about how hard it was for him as a black immigrant, but he'll only say black immigrant in front of you. When he gets in front of white folks, it'll just be immigrant, or he'll just be talking about how America did so much and he's so grateful. The grateful Negro shtick is what he'll be doing for white people. He'll only talk halfway black when he's in front of you to see if you're silly enough to fall for it. And Kamala Harris will go ahead and sing you a couple of bars about how she was a second or third class to integrate her school, etc., etc. They'll do that. And then somehow you're supposed to think that they're down with the community. And you need to go and vote for them because somehow you're going to get something out of that. Politics is a business transaction, plain and simple, full stop, quid pro quo. You want my vote, I want tangibles, and an ongoing commitment to supply more tangibles. Because that's what voting is about. It's about who gets what. Out of whatever resources the country has, how's it going to be divided? Well, let's hold a vote on it. That's what voting is supposed to be about, but it damn sure doesn't work that way for black people. And we got to put an end to that. Stop playing along with a game that is deliberately rigged so that you get left out. You got to take control of the situation. No more letting white supremacy present to you their slate of hand-picked puppets, and then you choose for white supremacist candidate A or white supremacist candidate B. Time for you to change it and put a black empowerment candidate on the ballot. You cannot vote for any of these clowns anymore. Now that you know their freaking names, you can't be voting for these people anymore. What have the immigrants presented to us that is of such value that we should do something as monumental as condone them breaking the law by stealing their way into the country? Why the world should we be supporting immigration, period? What's in it for us? Ask the immigrants, what's in it for black people? What are you presenting to us as tangibles? What are you going to do for me? To understand that when it comes to the immigrant black caucus, it's not even totally about their foreign ancestry. These guys, just as a group, They are tools of white supremacy. And that's how they see themselves. They see themselves as Latinos and immigrants and islanders and boule. That's how they see themselves. This is why they go nuts trying to represent immigrants, people who aren't even in their districts, but they go out of their way to ignore or even show open contempt for foundational Black Americans.
Yeah, right.
Now you see why the so-called Congressional Black Caucus doesn't give a damn about us, and they're always so eager to jump out there for immigrants because that's what these con artists are. The point of having a Congressional Black Caucus is supposed to be so that there's a group representing the interests of Black people, starting with the ones who are already here and who have been here from day one. Instead, this gang of liars and con men are there to represent their home country or the ones their parents came from. They pride themselves on not being one of us. So we ought to make sure that this distinction is made loud and clear. These immigrant blacks simply cannot speak for us, and they should not speak for us. Since they're so obsessed with immigrants, then that's who they need to go represent. But they cannot represent us. This immigration advocacy violates the will of Black people. That's the way it is. We didn't vote for these guys to represent Latin America. We voted for them to represent Black America. While Ayanna Pressley's asinine display disgusts me, it doesn't surprise me. White media is the mouthpiece for established white power. They see what we're doing and the impact that it's been having. So what you see is them trying to manufacture one high-profile media extravaganza after the next in the hopes of trying to get attention on their Black bootlegs. This is white power's way of trying to counter-program. They see that we're reaching Black folks, the right Black folks, the Black people who are going to get off their butts and change things. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to put up some distractions now. Oh, look, we got some actors and a couple of do-nothing academics. And they're saying that Black folks don't need a check for reparations. That's the big message that got taken away from that con game, that fraud for reparations that took place on Capitol Hill a few weeks back. The takeaway, Black folks, why, we got some Negroes here who are saying that Black folks don't want a check. In fact, they didn't actually say what Black people wanted at all. That seemed to be the point. They see what we're doing. We are teaching our people the essential selfishness of survival, as Dr. John Henry Clark beautifully put it. We've taught our people that it's not okay to support people who do not support us by name specifically. We've seen Black bootlicks like Big Bird and Roly Poly and Goldie Taylor brought low. We cut the legs out from under presidential candidates. We're getting serious with all the people who have been attacking us. The only way to stop this process is if the white media can convince us that Donald Trump's Twitter tweets are more important than our tangibles. Trump doesn't represent your interests, but neither do the Democrats, and definitely not these immigrants. We have no friends. None. Is Donald Trump a racist? Of course he is. But at least he's an honest racist, and I don't give him points for that.
No.
He's never going to get my vote. But that doesn't distract me. It doesn't fool me into thinking, oh, I got Donald Trump being a loud and proud racist. So that's certainly worse than these quiet and meek racists over here calling themselves Democrats. Neither one of them's on our team. So we're holding out for something better. We're holding out for a Black agenda being pushed and presented by our own representatives.
But then two people get mad on speaking on some shit.
It's our refusal to back immigration. It's our determination to push for economic power
I'm still
for
putting in
ourselves.
that work, nigga.
They absolutely have to get us off of that issue. So we see they're stepping up the propaganda. They're flooding the airwaves now and the online sphere with political theater like this. They have a gargantuan advantage in media outlets over us, so for every one video essay or one social media post that we put up, they can post 100 or more lies. So how is it that we've made the progress on pushing these issues that we've made so far? It's because we've got an equalizer. You. Yeah, the bad guys may have us outgunned, but we've got them outclassed. You've got to support the new voices of Black media. If we don't push your interests, if we don't curate and direct the social discourse in the black community, then we go back to the toilet of Charlemagne the Fraud and Roly-Poly Martin doing all the talking. Now, what is to be done when it comes to chumps like Antonio Delgado, someone who has a foreign parent and someone whose bloodline also goes back to the plantations? What's to be done then? After all, didn't Malcolm have a foundational black father? Yes, he did. But let's not conflate the standard for reparations with the standard for whether or not we as a community will allow you to speak for us. Being eligible for reparations doesn't mean you're eligible for the black family's respect, and we have to get serious about enforcing that principle. You see, the reason that I started off with that Tigers of Tammany account was that you understand, yeah, the white guys were sitting here doing their little cosplay. We are Indian braves, and this is our wigwam, whatever. But when it came time to talk turkey, they were not talking in the terms of Native Americans. They were talking in the terms of Europeans, talking about defending our country. Native Americans didn't believe in country. They didn't believe that you can actually own the land. And talking about will you defend, hold up our particular constitution. You see, they were talking about a value system. And that value system was and is white supremacy. That's what they wanted to be sure of. You couldn't just walk into the Society of St. Tammany and say, I'm a good white man, and I think y'all all let me in. Show me the secret handshake. They'd be like, what's this Society of St. Tammany you're talking about? What's this Order of Columbus you refer to? We don't even know. What are you talking about? They would ignore you, and they would pretend ignorance. Or they might decide to take up the freaking tomahawk and open your mind for you. See, they understand that there's rules and regulations that go along with every group. Every group has some standard of decorum, some standard of rules, some code of conduct. See, that's what the whole ritual by the Society of St. Tammany was meant to do. It was meant to begin the process of there's a code of conduct that goes along with our group. That's why they said you're not to discuss what goes on here on the outside. What happens inside these walls of our wigwam, it stays here. And you got to be ready to die for this. That's what they pointed out. Are you ready to die for this? And that's the reason why they did it the way that they did. First question, is this stranger worthy of a seat among us? First thing out of the gate, is this guy even supposed to be here? Man, what do we know about this fool? Who's his people? Who sent him? What are his credentials? And then next they asked, and this lets you know how the European thinks, they asked, will he unbury the tomahawk from beneath the great wigwam before his country's good requires? And that's one of the things that Native Americans allegedly did. They bury a tomahawk into a tree, and the tomahawk is not to be retrieved until after the war is over. So right after the European asked whether or not this guy even should be here, the very first question is this guy ready to go to war? Lets you know what the European was thinking. This ain't about peace. This ain't about friendship. This ain't about Native American culture. This is about reinforcing the European's war culture, because that's how he got the world and how he intends to keep it. So first order of business, is this guy ready to go to war? And he ain't going to stop fighting until we've taken everything that we want. And then next they asked, will he bear adversity, torture, and death in defense of liberty? Remember, liberty, I educated you guys on what liberty means. Liberty means power. Because everything that the European talks about as being their liberties, these are the things that black people recognize as being power. We simply talk about, I want to be able to do what I want, etc. That ain't what the European means. It's a matter of I can take what I want, do whatever I want to whomever I want. And I have the ability to use unrelenting violence to get what I want. That to him is liberty. And I get to have my violence held on a pedestal and held up for glorification and worship. That's what he thinks of as liberty. What you think of as liberty, he sees as a threat. He should. But that's what they started off with. They've started asking, putting people on notice, should this guy be here? Is this somebody who's going to call for peace when we've already said we're going to war? Is this somebody who the enemy will be able to torture into submission? Is this somebody who will bear adversity for this group? Will he endure torture for this group? Will he die for this? You see, Tammany Hall ruled New York with an iron fist for 200 years. Everybody's familiar with Boss Tweed. But what they're not familiar with is the fact that Tammany Hall started 100 years before Boss Tweed even came along. He was just the most corrupt one that they had. And Tammany Hall, at least in name, Tammany Hall endured all the way up to the 1960s. And by the way, before I forget, I do think that it bears noting that, did you know that Tammany Hall actually had a black Grand Sachem? Now, I know that's going to come as a surprise to a lot of you guys. Did you know that? J. Raymond Jones. This guy was the first and only black head of Tammany Hall, which of course we know with Barack Obama, when they sit there and say the black man's in charge, I mean, he ain't in charge of nothing. It was just them taking a last-ditch effort and trying to sanitize their image. But Tammany Hall, yeah, they started off with a bunch of white guys cosplaying as Native Americans, and they ended with a black man cosplaying as a European. But you see what's going on here, though. Nonetheless, as far as they were concerned, there have to be rules and regulations. And do you think that the good Mr. J. Raymond Jones was not asked all the same questions that Mr. Morton was asked? Do you think they didn't ask him whether or not you're worthy to be among these good white men? Do you think they didn't ask him, when we go to war with these black folks, your relatives and friends and family, are you going to be calling for peace before white supremacy's through doing them in? Are you willing to endure whatever sort of indignity and questions? When the black community gives you a hard time, are you going to crack under pressure? Do you think they didn't ask him that? Yeah, white power believes that before they admit you to the group, they got to check you out first. You ain't just getting in because you show up. Black folks are the only ones who admit everybody sight unseen. That's how you wind up with Richard Aoki, the so-called Yellow Panther, an FBI agent getting into the freaking Black Panthers. That's how you wind up with black organizations who are riddled with spies and informants and double agents. That's how we wind up like that. No rules, no regulations, and because as black folks, as far as we're concerned, everybody can just dump their casts off on us. We're accepting everybody, and we leave ourselves easy prey. Don't you think it's time for that to stop? See, our unconditional acceptance, we've extended it to practically everyone, and this is a mistake. We have to recognize this for the cultural failing that is to not be admitted to the group. Because a group that lets everyone in is nothing more than a circus. So that's how I feel whenever I look at members of the Black Immigrant Caucus who happen to have one parent who actually may most likely be one of us and another parent born elsewhere. When I look at them, I'm looking and going, well, I don't know. I just don't know. Part of the reason that we're so riddled with stabbers, bootlicks, and scumbags is because we allowed it to happen. People come among us just to see what they can get. We are nothing more than fools to be lied to, manipulated into this or that direction, and then ignored. And this by people who claim to be our representatives. If we actually had people pushing our agenda, we would have had a lot of things that we needed long before now. Ayanna Pressley can get out there and do a press conference for immigrants, so why hasn't she and the rest of the congressional black talkers done a press conference pushing for reparations? John Lewis would get on the floor of the House of Representatives because a gay nightclub got shot up. Meanwhile, this guy's not doing any sit-ins after the Mother Emanuel Church massacre. You see any of them having a press conference pushing for a federal law to punish the police? The congressional black talkers ain't doing that. None of them saying, well, if Barack Obama can sign a Blue Lives Matters executive order, then he can sign a Black Lives Matters executive order. They're like, no, we can't do that. Black folks are the very ones we're at war with. The congressional black talkers are an arm of white supremacy. They are part of white supremacy's forward element. The white supremacy put among us for the sake of sabotaging our efforts, and they have done their job admirably. After after we broke Kamala Harris's campaign, after we forced a congressional hearing on reparations, which was presided over by Sheila Jackson Lee herself, there's no member of the Congressional Black Caucus who can lie and say that they don't know that there's a major push underway for slave reparations from the black grassroots. They cannot say that they don't know that reparations is a major grassroots issue for black people. They know it, and they're hiding from it. They're not moving on the issue. None of them are making it a campaign. None of them are supporting it. That's why I started off with the account of the Tammany ritual. These black migrants who came here to take advantage of the opportunities that we brought about and to legitimize this process of replacing us, they would try to lay claim to our history. They're walking in the shoes of white power who brought them here. They'll toss around some loose talk about the plantations, but that had nothing to do with them. They'll talk about the 13th and 14th Amendments, but those are the fruits of our struggles, not theirs. Sheila Jackson Lee's people didn't need the 13th or 14th Amendments. We did, and still do. Stephen Horsford, his people didn't benefit from the Emancipation Proclamation. They weren't even here. So what the hell would he be talking about trying to laud the 14th Amendment and trying to talk about how important that is to black folks? It ain't important to him. Joe Neguse didn't need it. Ilhan Omar damn sure didn't need it. Kamala Harris definitely didn't need it. And yet they'll toss those things around because they know that they matter to you. These were the fruits of our labors. Roly Poly and Joy Reid, they love to toss around names like Shirley Chisholm and her political accomplishments. But the only reason that Shirley Chisholm was able to even run for office or even had enough black support to win office was because of the 15th Amendment. But that wasn't Shirley Chisholm's accomplishment. And it wasn't the doing of her immigrant parents either. This was our doing, not hers. She had nothing to do with that. So it's a lie to act as if somehow the black vote and the benefits that she derived from it was somehow her achievement. This is the reality. These are the hard realities that need to be said. Because when we talk about foundational black, it don't just mean whether or not you've been here for a couple of days. You don't just get to show up and say, I went to Morehouse, or I went to some other HBCU or some other do-nothing school. And, well, yeah, that means that now it goes for Brown v. Board of Education and the Voting Rights Act. Please tell me what Barack Obama's Kenyan father had to do with either of those things. See, the only thing Barack Obama's father was looking for was a white woman to snuggle up with. And apparently he found one. And when you're done finally facing facts as to what Barack Obama's father didn't contribute to the civil rights struggle, you can then go ahead and tell me what Kamala Harris's Indian mother had to do with the black struggle or her Jamaican father. What the world did they do to contribute to all the things that she takes advantage of? This is the most perverted form of historical revisionism, but white power has to do this in order to legitimize what is clearly nothing more than base thievery, theft of our history, and what we as a unique people have done, all for the sake of trying to legitimize the greatest crime in human history, by claiming why we didn't steal these blacks' entire legacy and then wipe them out. Why we got a couple of these black immigrants over here, and why Joy Reid just got through telling us about how important the 14th Amendment is to her. And Kamala Harris said that she got bused to school a couple of times. So, you know, that whole Brown v. Board of Education, we owe that to Kamala Harris. We owe that to her family. We owe that to her because that's part of what she and her folks contributed to this country. That's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to manufacture a legitimate basis by which to have their hand-picked puppets claim what we have done. Because when they do that, the one thing Joy Reid won't be doing is demanding reparations. The one thing Kamala Harris won't be doing is demanding that police be locked up for brutalizing black people. That's what they won't be doing. And that's what this is all about. It's meant to lay the groundwork for that, this continuing operation in order to scour us from the face of the earth. Foundational black Americans have changed the world. And now it seems everybody's always rushing to try to claim what we've done, whether it be in music, whether it be in fashion, whether it be in athletics, whether it be in social and political movements. We do all of these things, bring all of these new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things into the world. And then everybody else tries to jump on it and claim they had something to do with it, when they didn't. Notice how all these Johnny-come-lately newcomers, these black migrants, don't carry the righteous anger that we do. They're not at all indignant nor looking for justice and righteous retribution for the greatest crime in human history. They talk in the same mamby-pamby, empty, mildly displeased way that white liberals do, because essentially that's what they came here to become. Joy Reid did not come here in order to become a foundational black American. She didn't come here to become a survivor of American slavery. She didn't come here for the sake of being part of our bloodline and being part of our group. She came here so she could be part of the same white liberal female sorority that she idolized from day one. That's the reason why Joy Reid is running around. And the same thing goes for Kamala Harris. We're trying to tear down white supremacy, and they're trying to solidify a position within it. So this is the reason why tonight's video essay had to be. I've told you a million times, and I'm going to continue to harp on this one. It's about more than just being black in color. I've told you that, and I'm also here to tell you that it's about a hell of a lot more than your bloodline, too. Being black isn't enough. Oh, it's crucial. You gotta have it. That's the foundation. But it's not enough. And having an ancestor who was in bondage in the United States, that's not enough either. Because you may have the bloodline, but the question is, do you also have the bond? Being black in color means nothing without also being black in your mentality. You gotta have all of it. See, if you were to have a black empowerment version of the Society of St. Tammany's little pathetic ritual, first question would be, does this person have a black mind? Oh, I can look and see that his skin's dark and his hair is curly, but I want to know whether or not there's a black mind in there. That'd be the first question. And once you have a code of conduct for those in your immediate circle, naturally you're going to be extending that to everyone who you have any sort of contact or dealings with, including those who are seeking to get your support for whatever political office that they're hoping to achieve. What it comes down to is, what standard are we using to select people who are going to lead us? What standard are we employing to choose the black people who we're going to choose to follow? As the B1 Brigade, I want our standard to be the very highest. Do you think the Chinese are using a low standard? Do you think the Europeans are using a low standard? Do you think any of them are just dealing from the standard of unconditional acceptance? These other groups are making the right choices based on their interests. They know what they want and how to pick individuals who are working for them and not for other people. This is who we're up against, so if we keep picking two-faced con artists like Kamala Harris and the immigrant black caucus, or street corner hucksters like most black mayors are, and other simple-minded clods, then we're going to go extinct as a people. We are not a stupid group, but damn if we haven't been making a lot of non-stop stupid decisions. And these other people, they've been coming among us and taking advantage of our generosity and, frankly, our naivete. White supremacy has used foreign blacks as Trojan horses for their agenda to confuse our internal politics, and for 50 years they've carried out their mission successfully. And then we came along, you and me, not just the black media, but those of you who are the fellow travelers of black empowerment. We came along and we've started to turn the tide, but we've only just begun. This is going to be a long-term project, folks. Please don't think this is going to be over in 2020. Some of y'all who aren't built for this, you're waiting for the 2020 election so you can declare victory and then go back to playing Xbox full time and debating about who's beefing with whom. This is going to be the new normal for us. What's been going on here? This is going to be our discourse as a people. This is going to be what dominates our daily conversation. Are we gaining more power? Are we gaining more resources? If not, why not? This is the standard. We will enforce it both in the U.S. and abroad, not merely with those who happen to be of European or Asian descent, but also with those who are of African descent and in the islands as well. This is going to be how we deal with everyone. Because when I look at Joy Reid, all I see is a white supremacist with a tan. This is about disciplining our team. So we have to be clear that the internal threats we face are a lot bigger than just some Johnny-come-lately like Kamala or Angela Rye with lettuce and tomatoes on the side, or roly-poly. It's time for regime change in the misleadership class. Time to run them all out. Cut them off root and branch. I don't care how good or loyal or effective you think that your own beloved black politician is, they all must go. Even if you think well of this or that black politician, what you need to do is you need to be mature and serious about what you want. Thank them for their service, whatever you think that might be. Shake their hand and then send them on their way. We have to show everyone that there's a We have to start from scratch. Because even your good black politician, they've got spouses or kids or family members who have been dependent on the current corrupt white supremacist system. They have all benefited from the white power system that they've been in office to serve. We have to show that we're not taking chances with anyone. You see, whenever white power has a situation where they feel that a foreign government has committed some sort of act of espionage or undermined the interests of the United States, you know the first thing that they do to the foreign delegation is they tell all of them, you have to leave. We declare you persona non grata. That entire diplomatic legation has to leave. All of them have to go. And we have to make sure that we are uncompromising in how we institute black empowerment. First thing we got to show is that we can force people out of office. If we don't want you there, you won't be there. We got to start getting tough with these guys. Why should anyone bend the knee to black power if black power does not demonstrate that there is an or else? I've been telling you about that for a long time. What is the or else? Do what we say or what? That's going to be their question. Well, if I don't, what are you guys going to do? Do what we say. Black empowerment has demands. You must follow those demands. You must carry out our demands. You must obey the demands of the foundational black Americans. And white power will simply look and say, or what? We've got to show the bastards the or what. We need an actual leadership class, one who we chose, preferably us. We need one who is ideologically steeped in black empowerment, not just some Johnny-come-latelys who have all sorts of questionable loyalties. We can't be sure what the hell they're loyal to. No, we can't play games anymore. All of this, we're trying to be liked by everyone, and we have to show unconditional acceptance, and, well, you know, white power's mistreating them too. Well, we got to stop making excuses for stupid choices. There is no black leadership class right now. We have the opportunity to start one from scratch. One that is built on our value system and adheres to our code of conduct and is promoting and aggressively pushing our agenda. We got to clear the bastards out. Don't make any excuses for that. White power's on the march, and they've insinuated a lot of people among us. Time for us to get serious about sending those guys packing and making it clear we're going to send you right back to the same white supremacists who put you among us so they can see that we have finally woken up, stood up, and are now charging forward. Influencing how people speak and what they... Promoting and forwarding black empowerment is not an event, it's a process. So is it a daily warfare, such as Paul described in the good book, or is it more of a daily labor that we have to carry out? Well, the answer is both. As long as white supremacy stands, it is going to remain a daily warfare, but it's a war that we are determined to win. The operatives of white supremacy are not merely in plain sight, they are also slithering among us. We have to keep our eyes open, and we have to keep our ears open, and we also have to keep our minds guarded. White supremacy's standard MO is to distract, or if that fails, to derail. What's the difference? Well, distraction comes in the form of a big, loud, noisy thing that's meant to get you looking away from the true path of black empowerment. To derail, on the other hand, is when white supremacy realizes that you're not a child, so they're not going to be able to get you to focus on a shiny object and get you on course. So instead what they do is they say a few things that sound like black empowerment, and as soon as they've got you nodding your head with them, then they come along with the other nonsense that you didn't ask for until you go in this other direction. Black empowerment is effectively derailed. Now, the reason that I've entitled this evening's video address Beating a Dead Stalking Horse is because you've heard me use that phrase numerous times, stalking horse. And what exactly is a stalking horse? Well, a stalking horse has traditionally been used by hunters. It's basically a cardboard cutout of a horse or some other bovine-like animal. And the hunter gets to stand behind it and take aim at his prey, because his prey will look and they'll see a horse and think, oh, well, there's nothing there but a horse, not realizing there's a man with a gun behind it. That's one definition of a stalking horse. But the practical definition of a stalking horse, the reason that it made it into modern parlance, is because a stalking horse is usually a proxy, but it being put forward by some sort of third party who's trying to remain anonymous. And this is how white supremacy has successfully manipulated the black community for so long, by using these black bootlicks, both whether they're on television, whether they're in political office, or as so-called social leaders, when they're nothing more than sign puppets for white supremacy. They are there to put you and I off guard. We look and we see an ostensibly black person not realizing that there's a white supremacist behind them taking aim at us. And so it's been. But now that you've got the black media, who have finally achieved a critical mass, got just enough black folks who can act as a force multiplier and signal boost what it is that we say, now white supremacy is being forced to have to try some other things. They're having to put aside some of the old strategies and some of the old ploys because they just don't work. And you can tell that the bad guys don't know when to spit or go blind. You can tell that we have thrown the white supremacist political machine into disarray because of the fact that in the last week alone, you've had both Deval Patrick, the biracial, high yellow, whatever you want to call it, former governor of Massachusetts, and no less than Michael the Bigot Bloomberg, both announced that they wanted to run for president. In the case of Bloomberg, he hasn't said, I'm running for president yet, but he's already apologizing for stop and frisk. And not even really apologizing. He's just basically saying, well, we could have handled things differently. So what that means is he has seen what happened to Kamala Harris. He saw that you have this sort of black woman who got taken to the woodshed by the black media, had her candidacy crushed overnight, and he's looking and going, well, hell, these guys will make short work out of me, and he's right, we will. So he thinks to himself that he's going to get out in front of it. He knows that he's going to get skinned alive for stop and frisk, but that was just one of a ton of unforgivable things that he did. He was strident and unapologetically racist in his promotion of stop and frisk. Among other policies, Michael Bloomberg is an anti-black racist, full stop. And if he thinks that giving some half-baked, clearly insincere, faux mea culpa for stop and frisk is somehow going to mitigate the damage, if he thinks that, well, this will at least make it where I've already addressed it, well, that ain't going to help you. Kamala Harris thought that if she just didn't talk about it, it would help. It didn't. So thinking to yourself, well, I'm going to defuse it. Nah, the old games don't apply. The old, well, we've already rendered that moot because we say it's moot because we've already addressed it. Now, the white media doesn't get to decide whether or not you have made amends. That day is done. The white media doesn't get to arbitrarily bestow innocence upon you. It's only the black media that can say whether or not you stand on the side of the angels. And Michael Bloomberg is nothing but the devil. And as for Deval Patrick, oh, this incompetent tool. This is Obama 2.0. I mean, all you got to do is look at Politico, and I think that these guys must be taking crib notes from the black media because they use the same terminology that I use. That Bloomberg and Deval Patrick are seen as stalking horses. And more importantly than that, you got people out there saying that these guys are supposed to be representatives of the Democratic middle. So these are the individuals who hopefully, I guess the idea behind them is they're going to appeal to the casual racists, read white moderates, and that's apparently what they're thinking. But we all know what's really going on here. What's going on here is the white powers that be are looking and going, man, without the black vote, everything is completely out of balance, and black people are demanding tangibles. So what we need is to put some candidates on the ballot who are going to bring in non-black votes. They're trying to prove that their little political shell game still has integrity, that it still has stability, that it still has equilibrium without the black vote. That's the point that they have to reach. They realize now that the new voices of black media, and the black media in specific, happen to have enough people listening now, we are having a real impact. We are influencing how people speak and what they say and who they're talking about. We're having a real impact on the electoral conversation, which is exactly what we set out to do over a decade ago, to take control of the social discourse within the black community. So you're not going to be able to go to the breakfast schlubs, and you're not going to be able to go to Roly-Poly Martin, and you're not going to be able to go to Joy Reid or any other clowns and think that you're going to bypass the popular will of the black community. No more. But that's not to say that these fools won't try. All you have to do is take Kamala Harris as a case study in this political exercise in futility that white supremacy is putting on right now. Kamala Harris's campaign is already comatose. She just won't call the time of death until March. That's what I predict that she's going to throw in the towel. At that point, I think there'll be enough people who are telling her, you're making a fool of yourself, to the point where even she can't pretend to think that she actually has a chance. The primaries don't start until February, with the Iowa caucuses being first. So she'll be marshaling all of her rapidly dwindling resources for that one. Now, the Iowa caucuses, of course, are not a primary, but they are a statewide plebiscite related to the presidential election, so they're a good test run for the primaries. Now, Kamala doesn't actually hope to win the Iowa caucuses, but her goal is to replicate what Obama did in 2008. She hopes to place high enough, and then is praying that finishing in the top two in Iowa is going to boost her standing for the real first primary, which is, of course, New Hampshire. Obama stunned everyone in 2007 when he came in second in New Hampshire. It was after that when people began to believe that white voters would actually vote for a biracial candidate. And that was pretty much Barack Obama breaking through. But of course, circumstances differed greatly between Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. Barack Obama didn't bring the kind of baggage that Kamala Harris brings. His main problem was that he hadn't really held too many political offices. But the advantage, of course, being was he didn't have much of a track record that people would be up in arms about. Kamala Harris has been making a disgraceful track record for the better part of 30 years now. She doesn't get to play the game of, well, you don't know much about me, so I guess I have to prove that I've got the aptitude and the attitude to be president. No, that's what Obama did. And he also had a black community that he was on again, off again, playing the game of, let's let the black community's imagination fill in the blanks. I'm not going to say what I'm going to do for them, but I'm going to kind of hint, kind of beat around the edges. And black people, they will be so desirous, so desperate to have a president who actually treats them like a real constituency, whose real needs deserve real policies. They'll fill in the blanks with their imaginations. They'll tell themselves that, oh, when he gets in there, he'll do something. He ain't saying, yeah, but he doesn't want to scare those white voters. And when I get in there, they'll then tell themselves, okay, he didn't do anything for us his first term. He's just waiting for his second term, even though practically nothing happens for a president during their second term. So Barack Obama played that game, and he muddied the waters for Kamala Harris and any of the others who think that they're going to follow in his footsteps. Yeah, Barack Obama didn't win in New Hampshire, though it turned his campaign around, but that ain't the way it's going to go for Kamala Harris, and that's not the way that it's going to go for any of the other Democrats. Kamala's hoping that placing high in Iowa and New Hampshire is going to boost her chances for actually winning in South Carolina, the last primary of February, and it's also going to be the first test of whether she can turn out the black vote. That's what Kamala Harris thinks that South Carolina is going to be. She's going to find out whether or not her sorority chums were actually able to turn out the vote, or if the black media did indeed crush her like a bug. She's going to find out, but you better believe that the white powers that be, they're also watching this too. The left arm of white supremacy, the Democrats, they're watching what happens not merely with their front-runner candidates, their front-runner phonies like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie the bigot Sanders, but they're also watching Kamala Harris because they need to find out how serious is the black vote? How serious is the black community about their tangibles? How serious are they about holding candidates' feet to the fire? How serious is this revolt in the servants' quarters? That's what the white media is trying to find out. And South Carolina will be a good test for them. Do the preachers and the other pulpit pimps still have the ability to turn out the black vote? Do the traditional stalking horses for white power, these black Greeks and sororities and these black phony social groups and these pulpit pimps and these black politicians, do these clowns who have been the operatives for white supremacy for the longest time, do they still have the black community on lock? If they do, well, things go on as they always have. That black media was a tempest in a teapot. But if they don't, then this will be real confirmation, not merely for the white media, not merely for the white political establishment, but it's also going to be confirmation for the black tools themselves. They will realize that there is a real grassroots movement afoot that has the ability now to cut them off at the knees and is exercising that power. It will signal to everyone that there has been a shift. A real shift, one that white power did not sanction, and hence one that white power cannot control. Now, whether or not this is serious comes down to you. The black media is merely giving voice to what you've been saying all along, but you must add good actions to these good words. So make no mistake, white supremacy is always looking way the heck down the road to see where the trend is going. And when it comes to the trend of American politics, the black vote is a swing vote. They want to know, is this swing vote truly as discontent and furious as they've been saying, or is this just another example of black folks needing to blow off some steam at Kamala Harris? And as soon as you get somebody out there who says, student debt, blah, 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 something or other, or somebody who says, the black community, empowerment zones, go ahead and give them some indistinct, unspecific, insincere rhetoric. Don't actually spell out anything specific about it. Just throw out some empty terms like economic development, something that could mean anything, but you're not going to actually earmark it for the black community. It's going to be something for everyone. And one or two black people, usually some hand-picked stooges, might be a part of some of these plans, but it won't amount to much for the black community. That's what the long game here is. And there are some black folks who are playing along with it, but make no mistake, Kamala Harris's would-be roadmap to the nomination is nothing more than a subset of white supremacy's overall plan for how they're going to get the black community back onto the electoral treadmill. But they're trying to find out, have they truly lost control of the black electorate and the black community? Are we serious that we are no longer going to allow anyone else to dictate to us what our interests are and what it is that we're going to do in pursuit of our interests? Are we speaking and thinking and acting for ourselves? Or was it just a matter of we were throwing the political equivalent of a temper tantrum and, a pat on the head will be enough to get us back on board? And another thing, white supremacy's black operatives have always found a ready audience with the old, dead black media. There's a reason why chumps like Hillary Clinton always go running to these phonies. The pursuit of attention from the white media, and when the closest you can get to black people is the old, dead black media, that tells you a lot. Who you talk to matters. If you're a black person who's attempting to try to get your message to the black community, or if you're trying to somehow have an impact on the social discourse of the black community, who it is you go to signal boost your message, who it is that you go to try to spread the word, that says a lot. And it also says a lot who you refuse to talk to. You can tell who white supremacy's black bootlicks are, who think they're going to hoodwink us, because they have the exact same problem that their white counterparts do, which is they're only comfortable talking to certain black folks because they know that they're not going to get any questions that they don't have any answers for. They simply want some fool who's going to sit there and try to palm themselves off as being a surrogate for the black community, a proxy for the black community. That's what stalking horses do. This is the reason why we could never get anything out of messy Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton, and why it is that clowns like D. Ray McKeeson haven't produced anything and are never going to produce anything. That's not what they were there for. If you got somebody who the white media seems very eager to give publicity to, and they're not attacking this black person, but they mention their name a lot. If that stuff starts happening, that's your first clue that the white media knows something about this person that you don't know. That's the first thing that ought to be your first warning sign. White media does not bring you on without trying to trash you. That's what Mike Wallace tried to do with Malcolm X back in the day. He didn't bring Malcolm X on for the sake of publicizing Malcolm X's agenda. He did it for the sake of saying the hate that hate produced. Trying to make an equivalence between a black liberation activist and, say, the Ku Klux Klan. Malcolm X never lynched any white person. His father was killed by white people. Malcolm X never burned any white churches. But the white folks were burning churches in Malcolm X's hometown, left, right, and center. Omaha was not safe. Negroes who are always running around trying to get white media attention, they present a friendly face to the propaganda arm of white supremacy. The two go hand in hand. White power believes in brain typing. I've told you about that in the past. Trying to figure out what kind of personality they're dealing with. They know a Negro who craves white media attention because they want to feel like they're part of the in crowd. No matter how much the white media abused Al Sharpton, for some strange reason, he never had a problem going to their shows, and he never seemed to hold a grudge about it, even though they were making him into a laughing stock, or if they weren't demonizing him outright. He never seemed to be bothered by that. He was a clown, and apparently he didn't mind being part of the white media's anti-black circus. Well, I got problems with that, and you should have problems with that too. And now look at Al Sharpton. He's got a little show, and the white media's decided we're not going to bring up Talana Brawley anymore because we got Reverend Al. Give me a break. And he's not bringing up the fact that the same people that he's sitting here yucking it up with, these are the clowns who have been justifying the murders of black people boldly. When Tamir Rice was murdered, you had Joe Scarborough and Mika the Bigot Brzezinski who were trying to blame the kid for his own death. Blame a black child for being murdered by some trigger-happy white cop who shot that child to death within 2 seconds of skidding up in front of him. That's who and what MSNBC is. No difference between them and the jolly, smiling racist over at Fox News. But all you gotta do is give Al Sharpton a little bit of, give him a couple of phony compliments and tell him, oh, we'll go ahead and we'll give you a little bit of money every time you give your worthless opinion on air. And as far as he's concerned, sold. How many pieces of silver for his wretched, for what passes for his soul? Not many at all, I would imagine. But psychic benefits, not giving you respect, but giving you a pat on the head, treating you like a dog, that's one of white power's primary ways of incentivizing people to do their bidding. I don't feel comfortable around black folks who are media personalities. I don't feel comfortable around people who the white powers that be have lifted up and tried to elevate them. When I see a black person who the white media is not going at and isn't trashing, I look and go, I'm going to have to keep my eye on you. See, Professor Black Truth doesn't feel comfortable around black celebrities or black athletes or black media personalities. And there's a good reason for that. These guys have established that basically they're not about to challenge white supremacy. Not at all. Oh, they may talk like they got their heads on straight. Bill Cosby did in the 70s, and then, well, he showed what his true colors were, and his white media friends showed what their true colors were. See, I'm not comfortable around these black celebrities, and they're not comfortable around black people like me, and that's fine. But it seems some of our people, they aspire to be black celebrities, which seems to be the case. And they want to hang around these people. As black folks, we are starstruck by black celebrities.
Thank you kindly.
Because
Appreciate
these
that,
are the
player.
only people who white power has allowed to be presented to us as symbols of black success. They were the only ones who the white media wasn't attacking nonstop. So we took the nonverbal cue that, well, if this guy if these white media types think this black person's all right, well, he's an approved of Negro. At least we can do it without too many people looking and going, do you know what the white media said about that Muhammad Ali guy? How can you say he's a draft dodger? Yeah, we decide that we're going to let the white media tell us who our heroes should be. The white media will tell us who our role models should be. And if the white media finds that we're turning them a deaf ear, or at the very least, we're not receiving, what happens is they go ahead and get some black shill to try to sell the. You know, there's a fundamental contradiction between calling out the old dead black media for their unbroken track record of telling lies to our community and perpetuating and promoting all kinds of off-code behavior and running interference for white supremacy's anti-black policies and activities, and then deciding that we're going to be calling ourselves acting as if these guys have not done anything wrong. There shouldn't be any black person who feels comfortable talking to any of these black shill bootlicks. When you see some Negro who claims to be speaking in the interest of the black community, but every time you see them, they're always running to talk to the shill mouthpieces for white media, that's supposed to put you on a red alert.
Make the motherfucker think they done did something wrong.
Now rotting black bootlicks for the old black media. They were propped up and promoted by the white media as a way of bypassing the popular will of the black community. It was the white media putting on a show. Here's some black person who's going to tell you what black folks think because we paid them to say it. That's the show that they've been putting on for the longest time. And they've been getting away with it. Because there was not a substantive and pervasive enough counter-programming voice that was saying otherwise, that was saying the truth. The black media's been out here in the vineyards toiling for over a decade, but the message has been repeated over and over again, and at long last, it has taken hold and is now bearing fruit. And we're not about to quit now. The entire point of the black bootlicks is to say that black people are dissatisfied and marginalized, and then as soon as they've got black folks nodding their heads and going, yeah, that's right, then these black bootlicks start lying and misleading the conversation away from the very things that we are saying are the problems. Joy Reid don't give a damn about black people. All she cares about is making herself as useful to the DNC as possible. She gets her daily bread from the left arm of white supremacy, and she's fine with that. Stacey Dash was putting in an application to get her daily bread from the right arm of white supremacy. She thought that she was going to be the darling of Fox News, and, well, we all know how that one turned out. The only reason that we know who clowns like Don Lemonade or Roly Poly Martin are is because the white media gave them big resources. In the case of Roly Poly, they used to give resources. And so they were given a platform. Because that's what happens when you amass the kind of stolen wealth that white supremacy has. You can arbitrarily give some chunk of platform, even though he doesn't deserve it, can't do anything with it. You can go ahead and turn your line to everyone else's reality.
That's right.
You make it where everyone sees them.
You can either ham or bacon.
That's deliberate. You are inventing a media personality where previously none existed. Look at Stephen Smith. Black folks can't stand Stephen Smith. But we all know that he's not there for the sake of saying anything that black people would actually agree with. The only reason he's there is he's supposed to be the black guy who nods his head and agrees and says, that's right, these NFL owners, they're not racist, and now they're these NBA owners, and well, it's about more than money, and well, there might be some small problems, blah, 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 blah. That's what he's there for.
When did you go?
And you'll see the rest of the white media, particularly ABC, which is the owner of ESPN. They're all part of the Disney Corporation.
Maybe you want Saturday.
Stephen A. Smith gets his behind out there. But all of a sudden, he pops up on
Is it the 20th or the 21st? That's what I'm saying. Is it the 20th? Because I remember I said
media's way of signal boosting rise that come from the black bootlicks. So you got some black folks out there who are calling themselves holding court with these black bootlicks. That is, for the white media, that is
not some
victimless crime. It is not. The white media's black bootlicks are deadly to us. These guys are the people who white supremacy puts out there and says our policies of attacking the black community are legitimate, and why we're not attacking the black community at all. Why, here we got Joy Reid who agrees with us. She's not about to say that Michael Bloomberg is completely unacceptable, even to be talking about the presidency, because he cannot undo the damage that he did with Stop and Frisk. She's not about to say, imagine the damage he'll do as president. She's not about to do that. And neither is Jonathan putting on his Cape Heart. And neither is Roly-Poly Martin. And neither are the rest of these fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools. So you better be real careful about the vipers that you're clutching to your bosom when you call yourself playing footsie with these guys. Their mission is to push the white power line. They are dark faces who are trying to promote white supremacy's agenda. And this is why you'll never see me talking to them, because it would serve no purpose. Have you ever seen what happens whenever black folks, some black dissident...
DL Plasma, or blood plasma donations, or you can visit for life, and you can earn up to $100 your first week of donating. If you know the extension you wish to dial, you may do so at any time. For our address and hours of operation, please press 1. For requirements to become a plasma donor, please press 2.
We'll stay off today. 10, so I gotta get the information from the next door neighbor to give it to him. Alright?
Please stay on the line while your call is transferred to the operator.
Yes, it's Michael. Michael Bonner, the knucklehead. Yeah, I need to know if today is my donation day. Oh. No. I'll just walk down and do the Cossack. No problem. Thanks, man.
I'm going to the bank.
Alright.
My phone.
I need your phone.
I got my phone. No, go ahead. I'll make it when I come back. Go.
Who means well, but really ought to know better. They call themselves going on these platforms that are either hosted by some white person or hosted by a black bootleg for the white media. The format's always the same.
That thing recording.
They put one black person talking sense on the panel.
No, it's recording in there.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's playing in there. It's not recording in there.
This type of format is meant to indoctrinate the viewer that the guy who's this one person who's outnumbered here, he's a crackpot, and he's out of step with the majority opinion. That's programming that the white media is doing. Because there's so many people who are disagreeing with him, obviously he must be wrong. And even the host is disagreeing with him. That's because he must be wrong. See, they never bring on multiple dissenters if they disagree with the network's standpoint. The entire point of these little charades is to reinforce whatever the core view is of that particular white media outlet. That's the entire point. And even if you get the better of them, even if the black person who's outnumbered, even if he does get in some good shots, and even if he does hold his own, well, all that'll happen is the next day that same white media network or radio station or what have you, they'll have another panel. Only this time, this black person who was talking sense won't be invited to it. This time they decide, we'll have the same conversation only without so-and-so. And then they'll talk amongst themselves about how wrong said person was, and they'll declare victory on the issue. That's another one of their favorite little ploys. Whenever they take that L, it's a matter of, okay, this guy is a little bit too good for us, so we'll go ahead and bring somebody else on, or we'll just not have them all. We'll go ahead and just commiserate in front of the camera about how wrong this guy is. So to me, talking to the white media or to the white media's black bootlicks, it's a largely self-defeating exercise under most circumstances. Now, I'm not going to say that it should never, ever be done, but it's a matter of, to me, it doesn't move the ball down the field. It reminds me of something that Bill Moyers said, that basically the way the media happens to have arranged itself in modern times, what the best that you can hope for is you've got one person saying one particular point of view, you got another person saying exactly the opposite, and they leave the viewer to split the difference. That's a recipe for maintaining the status quo. That's the only thing that a format like that can do. It maintains the status quo because it does not ever say, wait a minute here, we know what the answers are to these political burning issues. We know what the answers are to these political questions. Instead, it pretends as if both sides are equally valid, and the black media does not partake in that lie. We know that both sides are not valid. Oh, there's a race war going on in America. Actually, there's been a race war going on for 500 years. And in every war, there's two sides, the right side and the wrong side. And this country's been on the side of white supremacy, and that's the wrong side. The black media represents the right side, the side of justice. Now, what they're wondering is whether or not we're going to be bought off, whether or not we're going to have stars in our eyes, and we won't. I warned you about the old, dead black media. These are proven white power puppets. Whenever you see someone who runs to one of these clowns, that's 3 red flags that you're dealing with an agent. To associate with the white media's black bootlicks, that is off code as hell. Last time he ran for president, Bernie Sanders boldly said that reparations was unfeasible. And yet, for some damn reason, he seemed just totally comfortable talking with Charlemagne the Fraud and DJ Penis and on the breakfast schlubs. And the same thing goes for Elizabeth Warren. You would think that Elizabeth Warren is a lifelong Republican. She'd be nervous sitting in a room with 3 allegedly black people, but she wasn't very nervous on the breakfast schlubs at all. Why do you think Malcolm Nance never seems to be bothered talking to Joy Reid? Because he knows that Joy Reid is never going to call him out for all the bullcrap that he says. He already knows that. So he has no problem talking with her. Hillary Clinton had no problem holding court with Roly-Poly Martin because she knew she would never be asked about her support for stop and frisk. She damn sure didn't do anything to stop it. And the 94 crime bill, she would never be asked, why is it that you never proposed legislation to repeal it or to do anything about it to undo the damage of it? She knew that Roly-Poly would never do that. So she was totally comfortable there. See, the operatives for white supremacy, they're very comfortable talking with the black bootlicks because they know that the black bootlicks are just so eager, drooling at the mouth to please white power. They get it. They know the function that these clowns serve. But while the Kamala Harrises and the Elizabeth Warrens are being made to feel all warm and cuddly in the warm embrace of these black bootlicks, meanwhile, our interests, the interests of the black community, are not being merely ignored. They're being run into the ground. Nobody is saying what needs to be said. Big Bird, when he had his stupid show on XM or Sirius, whatever the hell it was, he had Kamala Harris on. This clown's supposed to be, to hear him tell it, the oldest, longest standing reparations organization in America. Yeah, but reparations damn sure wasn't on the menu when Kamala Harris was sitting there right in front of him. This is supposed to be a guy who was real indignant. He was indignant when he was on Joy Reid's show. When he was on her little side show, he was real indignant. He was going to be the voice of reparations for black folks. But when he had Kamala Harris right in front of him, reparations was a blink and you'll miss it mention. His big goal was, well, I need to help Kamala Harris become president because then I can take some pictures with her, and that's some social capital, and I'll be able to go to the Kamala Harris's inaugural luncheon, to be followed by the spring luncheon for the NAACP. You know, every time Big Bird looks up, every time he opens his mouth, he's talking about the next luncheon that he's going to, or the luncheon that he just got through coming away from. This is supposed to be who we listen to. This is the old, dead black media. And you wonder why I have such contempt for them. Mm-hmm. The people who put Barack Obama in the White House were young black people, underfoot in the grave, the other leg dangling. They're done, and they have not accomplished anything for either Generation X or the millennials. But what does Roly-Poly say? I mean, y'all need to forget about them young black voters. They ain't gonna accomplish. They ain't gonna do nothing. They ain't gonna matter a damn for the election. You need to be talking to them older black voters, because they're the ones who really count in the election. They're the ones who votes really matter. What Roly-Poly was really saying is that he has no influence with young black voters because the black media has knocked him out the box. So he's trying to get people to not look at the fact that he has no influence with the black voters who actually put presidents in the White House. Instead, it's a matter of, don't worry about the people who I don't have any influence with. Just concern yourself with this rapidly diminishing, dwindling elderly group, the 55 to dead demo. Go ahead and concern yourself with them, because there's a few of them who still listen to me because they remember when I used to be relevant. We as a people have got to start learning to be more discerning than we've been, and get beyond the point where we can't see danger until it slaps us in the face. See, I judge people by the company they keep. And as the pressure is applied, as black empowerment is able to increasingly make its demands felt and refuses to compromise on them, as the black media starts making things hot in the streets, everyone will be forced to declare where they stand. Everyone will be forced to reveal what they've really been about. See, people can talk a good game all day long, but it's what they do that matters. Black media is changing the game. The people who are trying to put a new twist on the same old black front Negro con, these guys are going to fade away. The people who have been slow to figure out the scams and schemes of white supremacy, they're going to be left behind. People who champion individuals or parties or particular legislation only to figure out later that they were fundamentally wrong, these are not people who should be listened to. You're supposed to perform due diligence before you call yourself talking to our people, not after. See, this is the reason why Kamala Harris has been all over the place when it comes to her criminal justice record. Because of the fact that she was doing what was expedient to white power, and now that she's being held to account, she's trying to run away from all the bad, malicious decisions and policies that she's been enacting and been prosecuting us with all this time. Now she's trying to run away from it. While marijuana is certainly something that shouldn't be legalized, the problem is it is an inescapable truth that the so-called war on drugs has been nothing more than a clumsy front for a war on black people. Kamala Harris had no problem defying the will of the electorate, as she put it, when it came to gay marriage. But as soon as you say, hey, there was only a handful of California voted against gay marriage. But California is all in favor of decriminalizing marijuana, which would help a lot of black folks and get a lot of black folks out of prison. Kamala Harris, and she walks away. You see, you got to be careful about people like that. People who are in favor of legislation that criminalizes truancy, but it only gets enacted against black folks, and then later on, well, I didn't know the law was as bad as all that. Yeah, but you're telling black folks that they should be in favor of it. And you got the old dead black media who's not on a warpath about it. When Kamala Harris sits in front of you, the first thing you're supposed to be asking her about is all the black folks she's put in prison. You guys will be up here ha-ha and yucking it up with her. But you see, that's what's going to happen. That's what happens if we just give it enough time. Even though time is our enemy, it's certainly against us. But nonetheless, as events play themselves out, all these folks who have been wrong, they're going to be invalidated simply because, and this is something that Kwame Ture, a.k.a. Stokely Carmichael, talked about. He said that either you are going to choose the path of revolution or circumstances will become so dire you will have no choice but to. And he was right. When the pain becomes great enough, when the enforcement arm of white supremacy starts really cracking down on black folks and they no longer have the luxury of being able to deny reality, when they get scared enough of white supremacy that they finally knuckle under and cave in and start begging white daddy not to be coming for them, the cowards will reveal themselves. The fools will reveal themselves. And the true soldiers will not have to reveal themselves because they've been standing in front of you all along. The only thing that will happen is you'll smarten up and be able to recognize, okay, this is what I should have been following all along. You see, the B1 message hasn't changed, and it's not going to change because we got it right the first time. So the stalking horses, they'll be propped up by white power. That's what white power is going to do, stalk. He's going to prop up the stalking horses while it takes aim at us. But you know what? Black empowerment is bulletproof. We didn't just get up yesterday morning and decide we're going to be doing this. We've been out here in the vineyards for a long dang time. And we're going to stay out here because of the fact that black empowerment is going to become the new normal. So all the folks who apparently think that playing footsie with the enemies of the black community is cute, in time, what's going to happen is people are going to see what a mistake it was. All this stuff will be revealed in time. Same way Kamala Harris was. Same way that the old dead black media has been. All of these things are going to be shown for what they are. And it's not a matter of we're trying to win an argument with anyone. It's just a matter of the truth cannot merely be the truth. It must also be told, and it must also be seen. And that's what the black media is doing. That's what the black media is about. So I'm glad that all this stuff is happening. Things need to be shaken up. People need to be made uncomfortable. They need to be made to no longer think that things are going to go on the way that they have. Make it where people have to actually fight to either prop up white supremacy or they have to fight in order to tear it down so that we can see who's doing the work and who ain't. As a people, we are being tested. History is testing us. And the passing grade will not merely be victory. The passing grade is going to be whether or not you continue to remain on this earth. You know, I seriously didn't want to address this subject because doing so makes me angry. And while I'm sure that there's a ton of things that could be examined from the Obama presidency, the truth is he's too puny, too inconsequential a figure for me to give a play-by-play analysis to. Simply put, I just can't motivate myself to get that concerned over the tenure of a do-nothing empty suit of a president. All Barack Obama deserves, and I'm being too generous by half here, is for me to touch on a few salient points. Feel free to give your own ideas in the comments section. Now, was there anything good off the bat that Obama did in his presidency? Well, I'm talking about in general. Obviously, for black people, he did nothing at all. Well, I guess as far as the cosmetics go, from an image point of view, Barack Obama was not an embarrassment, not even to black people as far as the way that he presented himself, stood in front of the teleprompter and talked to the press, or on the world stage for that matter. Barack Obama never made any verbal gaffes, at least none that will follow him. He had no awkward moments to speak of, and he was always poised and cool, even when being yelled at live on air by a racist Republican clown. Nope. Seemed nothing ever got to him. Not even the calls for justice by black people, though we'll get to that later. Barack Obama is by far the most studious president in living memory. In manner and comportment, he was more presidential than anyone we've ever seen in the White House. So for future historians chronicling his tenure, they will have a hard time attempting to make him to seem as less than his white counterparts. As far as presidents go, however, Barack Obama will ultimately be remembered in the same company as a President Grant or a George H. W. Bush. He had a couple of big moments, but nothing that changed the world. He merely launched some military during speeches, and fortunately nothing like 9/11 happened on his watch. He'll be an average president, and for him, a man who lived his entire life trying not to offend too many white people, that will be more than sufficient. To Barack Obama, his legacy was that he didn't ruffle any feathers, certainly not white ones, and that's what he always wanted to be remembered for. Of course, we can't mention Obama's presidency without mentioning his signature achievement. No, not health care, besides that's going to get wiped out next year or so anyway. I'm talking about the successful killing of Osama bin Laden. For Barack Obama, that happened to be a win-win all around. Republicans had spent years saying that Barack Obama was a secret Muslim. Kinda hard to do that after he killed the most notorious radical Muslim on the planet. Barack Obama managed to do in 2 years what both Bill Clinton and W failed to do in over 15, to kill the leader of Al-Qaeda. After 9/11, W botched the siege of the Tora Bora Mountains, and once he parlayed a national tragedy into a blank check to pursue his interest in Iraq, Bush completely abandoned all efforts to kill the terrorist leader. I suppose from W's point of view, a living terrorist leader was of more political value than a dead one. After all, so long as bin Laden was still alive out there somewhere, Bush could always wave the bloody flag of 9/11 and tell everyone that they had better obey him, lest another national tragedy befall the nation. Never mind the fact that it was Bush's gargantuan incompetence that allowed 9/11 to happen in the first place. How many presidential daily briefings had that nincompoop ignored? How many times had he been warned that Al-Qaeda was about to strike in the U.S., and he had other things to do after all? Those presidential briefings were always saying that Al-Qaeda was just about to strike. I guess it never occurred to the moron that the reason that the reports all said that was because they were about to strike. Well, Barack Obama took office, and as soon as he was sworn in, he very quietly restarted the investigation into Osama bin Laden's whereabouts. He quietly retasked the CIA with picking up the long-since cold trail of Osama bin Laden. And what a surprise! It turned out finding him was easier than anyone thought. In what amounts to his only real example of bold foresight, you'll recall that during his Democratic primary debate, then Senator Hillary Clinton, Obama repeatedly said that he would send U.S. forces into Pakistan without asking that government's permission if that's what it took to get Osama bin Laden. Senator Clinton scoffed at the idea. On live television, she told everyone that that was precisely the type of brash advocacy that was exactly the reason that Senator Obama lacked the judgment to be president. Of course, this is the same Senator Clinton who, when she became Secretary of State, all but started the Syrian civil war and threatened one country after the other. Anyway, the rest is history. The CIA successfully tracked bin Laden down in short order, and Obama got a chance to go to the war room of the White House and pose for an uncharacteristically engaged photo of himself leaning forward like he was watching an intense football game, when in fact he was merely watching the raid going down. Without the loss of a single American soldier, Osama bin Laden was killed. About the only loss during the mission was of one of their stealth helicopters. Gee, you know, after Desert One, Somalia, and now this, maybe the U.S. needs to stick to ground transport when it comes to conducting special operations. Helicopters are clearly bad luck for the U.S. military special forces. After the killing of Osama bin Laden, Republicans tried in vain to rebrand the operation as somehow having something to do with George W. Bush, but that fell flat. The public wasn't fooled, and so Barack Obama does get the credit for having killed the leader of the September 11th attack. That brings us to the next subject, disaster relief. Unlike W, when massive floods hit South Louisiana last summer, Barack Obama actually managed to mobilize the National Guard and respond quickly. But then again, he was actually wanting to respond, so I'm not sure how to respond to. I'm talking about the lead water crisis in Flint, Michigan. He decided to pull a W on that one, not giving any substantive response at all to people whose problem was not too much water, but rather too little. And so we see the balancing of this whole policy. He had a natural disaster in Louisiana that he responded to because it was advantageous to him, and a man-made disaster in Flint, Michigan that he didn't respond to because politically it wasn't advantageous. He knew full well that if he was going to respond to the crisis in Flint, that he would also have to challenge the Republicans' pathetic state emergency manager ploy that everybody knew was rooted totally in racism. He would have the Justice Department actually have to investigate and at some point sue the Republican governor and even possibly pursue criminal charges against Rick Snyder. But for the milquetoast President Barack Obama, that was a little bit too much steel he would have to have in his spine to pull that one off. And so, with black people desperately asking for help, Barack Obama decided he just couldn't. Now, here's one that a lot of you probably don't think too much about, but it was actually something that was near and dear to my heart.
What?
The FCC. Barack Obama surprised me when he put Tom Wheeler in charge of it. That was because Tom Wheeler had actually come, like many of the other FCC commissioners before him, from the very communications corporations themselves. But Tom Wheeler, it turned out, couldn't be so easily controlled by the communications cartels.
What's up, new subscriber?
And Chairman Wheeler has actually
hit that like
done
button,
much
hit that subscribe
to try
button
to
when you
restore
get
something resembling public control to the public commons. And the truth is, Barack Obama was the one who put FCC Chairman Wheeler in place. He defended net neutrality, among other communications policies, and that was a big win. I got news for you folks. The internet was not created by the communications cartels. Like all of America's infrastructure, it was created by your and my tax dollars. The big corporations came in and just took advantage of what the American taxpayer had already put in place. They then did what they always do. They went to the government and demanded laws that would make it where all of these publicly funded institutions would be off limits to the very public who created them in the first place, monopolizing the public commons, locking the people out of the very arenas that their tax dollars created. They did it with telegraphs in the 19th century and later telephones, motion pictures, then airlines, radio, television, and now the internet. The big problems with the prior forms of media was that the cost to produce them was prohibitively expensive. This acted as a natural barrier that kept all except for the elites out. And as I keep telling you, the men who own the media do not and have never seen themselves as being in the business of entertainment. They understand that they are in the business of mind control. The media defines the culture. Those who own the media see themselves as cultural gatekeepers. They do social engineering through the media. They arbitrarily decide who will be heard and who won't. They also decide how people are to be portrayed in their media. Who is to be seen as the good guys? Who are to be seen as the bad ones? And for what reasons? They dictate to the public what to think and, more importantly, what to think about what they've seen. And their control is absolute and impossible to challenge, or at least it was, until the advent of new media. The guys who previously controlled all venues of communications want their monopoly back. Too many people, particularly new black media, are talking, and worse than that, they're saying the wrong things. They are telling people to stop going along with the status quo. People realize they're not alone anymore, and worst of all, these people are meeting online but organizing offline. White media used to be able to tell people that black empowerment was only for kooks, that America is just fine. And the bad stuff that happens every day because of white supremacy, well, these are only some minor flaws. But other than that, everything's cool. They could talk around the issues, but with new black media voices that have emerged that are coming straight up the middle, this isn't so easy anymore. We are challenging the status quo by taking control of the discourse within the black community and elevating the debate. Because for too long, the dominant society has attempted to dictate to black people a false choice. That we could either support white leftists or be pretend establishment types and become token Negroes for the right. But we in intelligent black society started a new conversation by alerting our people to the fact that there has always been a third option. Black empowerment. And we've been heard. The white media has been forced to cut back on the number of bought and paid for black pundits that they put on air and choose some who sound somewhat more like us. Sure, these clowns are selling the same soap, albeit in a different package. But the point is, we're fighting the bastards. And in order for the white media to compete, we haven't had to start talking more like them. They've had to start talking more like us. They know we're here. They've heard our message, and they fear it. They should. In response to the threat that new black media now poses, the white media has tried to preempt us by establishing what they've branded as black-oriented websites. But we educated our people about that scam. We've taught black people to finally start asking exactly who owns these websites, TV stations, and publications that you see black columnists working for. We have established a new vocabulary geared towards anathematizing those who the white media has traditionally used to deceive and mislead us, and to expose these new charlatans who, as usual, pretend to speak to our interest, but who ultimately are there to try to dictate to us to blow off some steam and go home. The Al Sharptons, the Jonathan Capeharts, the D. Ray McKeesons, the Jamila Lemieux, and the Goldie Taylors, the Melissa Harris Lacewell Perrys, and their dim-witted wannabes. Thanks to us, cooning is a career that doesn't come with a retirement plan. And in Goldie Taylor's case, it doesn't even come with a plan B. And before it's all over, cooning won't be a viable career choice at all. This is what we are able to do with the meager resources that we have today in our infancy, when everything has just started. Imagine what can happen with a concerted effort across the board, organized and properly funded. That's what the future of new black media is. And that is what the white gatekeepers are hoping to kill early. We've gathered our following and have educated them about exactly who it is who pays the black pundits and writers you see and hear to say the crap that they do. We have isolated them and are now beginning a substantive effort to push back hard. White media cannot afford to give a platform to us, not even for the sake of debunking us, because our message is airtight. To even mention us would be the same as attacking themselves. So their strategy now is to try to use the government that they own to prohibit us from being able to use media at all. They want to turn it into the same closed shop that TV and the movies are. Sure, it's there, but without government permission, you'll never be able to use it. So, to have the FCC that Obama put in place fight the bad guys is an undeniable good. I guess that's how Obama manages to live with himself. He went back on so much of his own rhetoric and promises, and time and again refused to do the moral thing, even when it would have been so easy. And I wouldn't snip at that if I were you. With Donald Trump coming into office and the looming AT&T Warner Brothers merger, I think we're about to see a massive rollback of these hard-fought, hard-won freedoms. And before long, you may well be looking back at Barack Obama's FCC and saying, those were the good old days.
That's what's up.
Well, we better be prepared to fight these
repressive
white media forces that are about to be on the march Because
I'm
the
saying, like,
main
you should
weapon
have
that
something
new
in your
black
account.
media has been able to wield
Like, you know how
is the
some
fact that
people
we can
don't have
outreach
shit
a large number of
in their account.
We've been able to get around the gatekeepers.
No, I can't. I'm not trying to spend that until I take care of what I told you I'll take care of.
Masses with
That ain't for
lies,
nothing else but
you
that.
can enslave them. But when you reach them with the truth,
I'll just ask
you set entire nations free. Okay, here's one that will get honorable mention. Barack Obama staved off another Great Depression, right? Well, for most black people, this is a distinction without a difference. The same way we hadn't been greatly affected by the real Great Depression back in the 30s, so we haven't seen any great deal of improvement between our condition now and during 2008. As Dick Gregory said, they took my house back when times were good. Our problem as black people isn't the condition of the housing market, or Wall Street derivatives, or any of the other things that white people are concerned with in their efforts to get their money to make money for them. Our problem is, and always has been, that we need an economy of our own. Barack Obama didn't have to do it for us, but he also didn't have to ignore us either and throw roadblocks in our path. Though we should be bluntly honest and admit that a great deal of Barack Obama's complete refusal to produce for black people was that too many of us were only too willing to keep giving him an out, asking nothing of him and requiring less. Excuse after excuse for fully 8 years, in fact, closer to 10 when you consider the 2 years that he spent gearing up for his presidential run. Black people were always saying, well, he can't do anything for black people until he becomes president, so don't demand that he make any commitments on the campaign trail. Once he got into office, well, we want to give him some time to settle in. We don't want to be dumping all of our demands on him, even though everybody else was dumping all of their demands on him. When he did nothing during his first term, we had 4 years of empty-headed clods saying, well, you gotta give him more time. And that became the mantra for 8 years. Give him until his second term. When he got to his second term, he still did nothing. He was handing out executive orders like they were so many pieces of candy on Halloween, but there were no treats for black people. He had executive orders for illegal aliens, for gays, for everyone except black people. Now, what does that tell you? Barack Obama knew full well that he had no plans of ever doing anything for black people. And the fact that so many black people foolishly decided to keep making excuses for him showed him that he would not have to pay a political price for it. Another of the feathers in Barack Obama's cap was that he saved General Motors, who then turned right around and continued to send jobs overseas. U.S. taxpayers were forced to bail General Motors out when the American public owes General Motors nothing. GM was a main culprit in the hollowing out of the American middle class. It is a crime that they got anything after what they've done. At the very least, they should have been made to pledge to bring back the jobs they sent overseas as the price of getting money from the very American people who they have been dumping out on the streets and leaving for dead for fully 3 decades now. How many news pieces have you seen of people walking out of yet another closed GM plant, looking like a defeated army resigned to quit the battlefield? Or rather like a betrayed army whose commanders ran away in the middle of the fight. Meanwhile, General Motors has been making record profits, and that's what makes General Motors' betrayal so galling. It would be one thing if General Motors had skipped town because the company was in trouble and had no choice but to seek cheaper labor offshore, but they began this policy of sending their operations overseas precisely at the time that the company was making more money than God. Folks, this wasn't about profit at all. This was only about class warfare. Yes, I know, class has nothing to do with black people, but it wasn't race that prompted General Motors to rip the American public off. It was the white elite attempting to turn the U.S. into the third world, impoverished, desperate, and easy to control.
Sure,
Barack Obama dumped Rick Wagner, but the truth is, after all of his screw-ups, Wagner was on his way out the door no matter what, and the taxpayers were forced to subsidize his golden parachute. And as black people, we have a particular bone to pick with General Motors. They were the ones who decided to gang rape Detroit and Flint and dump both of their bodies in the bay. The only black people of any note in numbers other than a handful who managed to make it into the middle class were precisely because of General Motors. And these black people were very loyal to General Motors as customers. And that same General Motors turned around and slapped these black cities in the face, taking their profits overseas, and then the same black people who had barely survived the exfiltration of General Motors then were forced to take what little money they had from what little jobs were left and then give them to General Motors all over again. This was a double insult. But the capstone on Barack Obama's bailout foolishness was without doubt his no-strings-attached bailout of Wall Street. Yeah, W set everything in motion, he set all that crap up, but Barack Obama was the one who allowed it to be completed. Billions and billions of dollars, without so much as a single condition attached to any of its use. Gee, I wonder if those same banks would be willing to give us, say, $1 million with no terms whatsoever. Just give me the money to spend however I want and with no obligation to ever pay it back. Barack Obama's #1 goal was to pay back his corporate masters through policy, and he did. It was the American homeowners who needed a bailout, not the banks. But Barack Obama wasn't there to carry out the wishes of the public. He was there to carry out the whims of the elite. Obama got more money in campaign donations than any presidential candidate in American history, Democrat or Republican. I'd like you to take a moment and think about that. Candidate Obama
got the wrong person.
Hillary Clinton more than Now, do you really think that was all because he was such a charismatic personality and just bowled these fat cats over?
No, but you
Money is every bit as important in a presidential election as running the right candidate. They didn't give him the money because they liked him. They gave him the money because they saw a unique advantage in backing Obama for the presidency. Neither the Democrats nor Barack Obama has ever established themselves as being so tight with big business that big business would need to part with $500 million for them. Hell, Hillary was closer to Goldman Sachs than Obama could ever hope to be, yet they didn't give her the kind of money they gave him. Perhaps because they could tell in 2008 that they had a far better prospect in Senator Obama. Now, think about all the money that W gave to big business. He raped the national treasury for them, allowed them to crush other countries merely to plunder them, removed practically all meaningful regulation of Wall Street and heavy industries. Yet he didn't get near what Barack Obama got in campaign donations. W will be remembered as the biggest political whore in American history. He will be remembered as the clown who gave away the store to every
I'm like, so they put you as pregnant?
He allowed them to live tax-free at the public's expense.
They got the wrong bitch. Give my friend.
Calm down, Mom.
Would dare to skin his own people
I'm just like,
alive
wow.
the way W did for
That's
big
really,
business.
like,
No one has been a greater stooge for them than him, and yet Obama got
this right.
than W. And this before he got into office. For a man with no connections and no power, they opened their wallets wide for him. Now, what on earth could Barack Obama possibly have offered these men that was more valuable than what W had already done? Well, when you look at the fact that not one of these corporate crooks has gone to prison, almost none of them has been so much as indicted or investigated, they got billions of dollars from the public for free, dollars that they then used to continue their freewheeling, bonus-filled days, and that there were no substantive laws passed to restrict their behavior in the aftermath of the greatest financial catastrophe since the Great Depression, well, when you think about that, I believe we're finally beginning to understand what it was that Barack Obama promised. This country was on the verge of a revolution 8 years ago, and that's no overstatement. So by using the monumental distraction of nominating a half-black candidate, the country could be pretending to confront its original sin, when in truth, Obama was just a flimsy frontman trotted out by big business to protect their interests. He defused a revolution, but in short order the old life returned, and things went on as they always had. In other countries, you defuse a revolution by sending in the military and gunning everyone down. But in the U.S., things are done a little different. You just invest $500 million in a skillful political puppet who will go out there and dispel all that public view. And the best part is, you're going to get all of that $500 million back many times over from the exact same public who you just pulled the wool over the eyes of. You know, in Japan, when a corporate leader fails, he has to go before the cameras and show his remorse. You're forced to have to humiliate yourself before the people because they put their fate in your hands and you failed. No such culture exists in the United States because the U.S. is under white supremacy. And these bastards have no shame. Barack Obama had a golden opportunity in his first 2 years to get his agenda through. But he lacked the boldness and the foresight to capitalize on this opportunity. His first 2 years in office, Democrats controlled Congress. Instead of going for the gusto like he should have, he instead went for meaningless photo-op legislation like the Lydia Ledbetter Act, which was just a bare sop to feminists, who were not the reason that he was in office, rather the black community was. But hey, Obama needed to mend his fences with the angry white females who were still sore that a black man was in the Oval Office instead of one of them. When Barack Obama got into the presidency, he was so busy being afraid that Republicans would say, see, he's a divider, not a uniter. He was terrified to actually take on the Republicans because all he could think about white people being displeased with him even in the slightest. But of course, as we all know, his bowing and scraping before the bigots on Capitol Hill didn't get him anything. He portrayed himself as being weak. They lost any and all consideration for him and instead ratcheted up the attacks. But in addition to being politically misguided, he was also fooling himself about the idea that he could ever bring Washington together. Barack Obama was criminally naive due to his own racial schizophrenia. A half-black man raised by a racist grandmother, Barry Obama has always had an issue with his blackness, lacking though it may be. He sees the world through white people's eyes, believes himself to be one of them merely because his mother just so happened to be a Caucasian. But he failed to ever realize that white people already have a definition for their ethnicity, and so much as one drop of black blood means you can never qualify. You know, black people will often hang around feel skinny themselves. Obama suffers from the same delusion. He hangs around white people because it helps him think of himself as more white. And so no matter how many wake-up calls white supremacy gave him, he never seemed to get the message. You know, here's an interesting factoid for you. Barack Obama went to Harvard. Then again, so did right-wing white supremacist Ben Shapiro, or as I prefer to call him, BS. So, BO and BS went to the same university. Makes sense when you think about it. Now we understand what purpose the Ivy League serves. Kids go in merely ignorant and come out totally stupid. It takes a lack of schooling to make someone uninformed, but only an Ivy League education can turn someone into a mouth-breathing idiot. Speaking of idiots, Barack Obama had not one but two do-nothing attorney generals, Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, who both refused to do anything about the free-roaming white supremacists fighting an open race war against black citizens. Instead, Obama chose to go before black audiences, always with cameras in tow, and lecture black men, and only black men, about how they need to stay home, be fathers, repeating the same kind of brain-dead talking points that white people always use. See, Barry never thought it was the wrong time to take some cheap shots at black men. This was his sop to white voters. He knew nothing tickled white people more than to see Obama reinforce white stereotypes. He knew nothing that he ever said would anger white people too long, so long as he made sure to bring in the black community for some abuse. That was always his get-out-of-jail-free card with the white electorate. The Obama Justice Department's pretend takeover of the Cleveland PD and Ferguson police departments and the so-called investigation of the Chicago PD were all just feeble PR maneuvers. These police departments and dozens more are dirty as hell. They should have had half of their respective police officers in handcuffs. But it never happened. It wasn't supposed to. It was just some more political theater being put on for black people's benefit. This was Obama's way of helping to rehabilitate one of the primary institutions of white supremacy. At some point, after the damage that the police had taken in the eyes of the public thanks to Black Lives Matters, and more importantly, thanks to the continued efforts of new black media, Barack Obama found himself having to help patch up the image of the enforcement arm of white supremacy. After all, without legitimacy, the police have no power, and we were directly attacking their legitimacy. Now the police are able to claim that they had rooted out the racists in their midst and put in place new policies, when in truth, they've done nothing at all. All of these departments that Loretta Lynch claimed to have taken over could now go before the public and brag that Barack Obama's Justice Department gave them a clean bill of health and that now they are beyond criticism. Think of it as going to a car wash. They were able to rinse off some of the dirt, but that's okay. They're going to go mud riding again in about 5 minutes, and nothing changes. Obama's Justice Department should have been running roughshod over the white supremacists, not just in the police, but in the society as a whole. They should have been declaring white supremacists terrorists, which is what they are. After the Charleston massacre, there was absolutely no excuse for not having done so. But Obama understood that most white people in the U.S. are outright white supremacists, or at the very least, highly sympathetic to the white supremacist cause. That's because every white person in America directly depends on white supremacy for every crumb of their daily bread. Obama knows, like everyone else, that if he ever actually were to tackle white supremacy, then it would require doing more than going after a few gun-toting bigots. There is an entire apparatus of white supremacy in government, business, and society. Whole scores of white people at every level who are fighting a race war against black people, and have been for a damn long time. The FBI wrote a report 10 years ago sounding the alarm to the fact that white supremacists had infiltrated law enforcement in America nationwide. And when you look at FBI Director James Comey, you see the white supremacists had successfully captured the post of America's top cop. Obama's deathly fear of offending white people has always been his Achilles heel. He knows the lies and duplicity white people engage in order to rationalize their behavior. He knows why they do it. Most white people are white supremacists. Perhaps not violent extremists, but certainly supporters of the violent extremists. You can fight white supremacy and defeat it using the power of the state. This was certainly the case in the 19th century after the end of slavery. Problem is, the effort has to be ongoing. Obama never had the nerve to confront white people, even when they gave him permission to do so. But without doubt, the greatest failure of Barack Hussein Obama's presidency was his total disdain and hostility toward the black community. Even himself always bashing black people, but particularly black men. He understood full well that by doing this, he was essentially apologizing for being black. And that's definitely the message that the white electorate picked up from his constant attacking of black men. Black children fight white supremacy in the streets, and he calls them thugs. Meanwhile, white college kids tear up their own communities over a pumpkin festival, and they're not thugs. Black kids fight police in the streets, and he calls them lawless, while the white supremacist DAs who routinely throw cases are not. Every white supremacist attack always turned into an opportunity to upbraid black people for something. After Sandy Hook, he cried like a bitch. After the Charleston Massacre, however, he broke out into a song.
Alright, that's it. And I'm gone. If you like the video and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share the video out so we can bring more to the content. And that comes from Professor Black Truth, the Black Child, and the B1 Brigade. Black first. Y'all gonna pay us what you owe. Cut that motherfucking check. And no less than 20 trill. Yagi.